I don't.
Hello, world.
Yes. All right. Here we are. Something like on time. That's not bad. I should probably figure out if my recording is going to work.
Oh, shoot. I'm not recording. I know we do.
And I'm the only professional here.
Yep.
Wow.
What a twist.
Yeah, that did not see
It's
that coming.
backwards day.
Okay, good. That's recording.
Gotta get all that magic.
Okay, I am now also recording, so magic plus plus.
Well, I'm going to stop.
All right. Going well. I should let me open some tabs. Okay. If everybody's recording, I can just go unless anyone wants me to not. Okay.
Is that an option?
What?
Is that an option?
To not do this?
All right. It's June 20th, 2021, and welcome to episode 237 of the Retrocomputing Roundtable. The RCR is a podcast about retrocomputer news. I'll just let the thing go by. Okay. The RCR is a podcast about retrocomputer news, nostalgia, collecting, and more computers in more schools. I'm Paul Hagstrom in Boston, and I'm joined today by two retrocomputing enthusiasts, the first of whom is Quinn Dunkey in Los Angeles. How are you?
Hello, Paul. I am excellent.
Fantastic. And the second of whom is Carrington Vanston in Toronto. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Excellent.
The fantastic Canadians are outnumbering everyone on the show today.
That's great.
We're
As
sorry.
Carrington sips his tea.
We're very sorry.
Yes, we're sorry that we're so
I drink
fantastic.
my tea.
Yes. In your empty white box, did you get rid of your couch too?
At the moment, yes. I have no sofa. I'm going to have another one. I'm just in between sofas.
Okay, in between sofas, as it happens.
Yep.
Happens to me.
Sorry, I forget that we're on a podcast now that we do the stream. So apologies to everyone for just talking about Carrington's interior decorating choices.
Apologies to everyone who's listening.
Yeah.
Just in general.
Of course, Carrington's
Yes, yeah.
interior decorating choices is basically just to not decorate, to live
Yes,
in
exactly.
a room that looks like a warehouse.
Hey, I have plants.
He's abstaining from interiors.
I have 2 plants and a record player. I don't see why I need anything else.
That's right.
I play music for my plants, and they appreciate it.
So last time we talked about the beginnings of computers in schools. Basically, sort of like, at least that was the intention, was kind of like the time when schools were starting to appear. And so I think we're going to keep going on that because there's plenty of stuff to say. Gwen has piled up things to say. I have things left to say. Carrington always has things. So maybe we can just dive right into that. What thoughts did you have, Gwen, on the beginnings of computers in schools?
Yeah. Well, in the age-old tradition of I was listening to the last show and had a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to say, and I was going to send in feedback, and then I was like, I'll just come on the show instead. I had a lot of thoughts listening to you guys talk about computers in school. I think that my experience is probably going to be most similar to Carrington's, and I think for those of us of a certain age, it was interesting to grow up with this stuff as the penetration into schools increased. We sort of lived through it. So I think for me, if my memory is correct, it started in 6th grade. We had an Apple II in the corner of the French language arts room, of all places. Mm-hmm. And much like Carrington had said, I think that was probably just that teacher was really interested, and so he had brought it in. I don't actually know what the source of that computer was. It didn't seem to be very official. It just sat in the corner and didn't do a whole lot. And one day I brought in Sargon 2 and fired it up on that computer. And I had done that because, I was a brown-nosing suck-up, and the French teacher was super into chess. And he just loved it. Like, he was clearly interested in computers, but didn't really know anything about them. And once he knew that he could play chess on this thing against the computer, that just blew his mind. And luckily Sargon was entirely memory resident, so you could just boot it up and leave it. And so I took the disk home, and he just left that computer on for, I think, like 30 years or so, just playing Sargon 2 against it over and over and over. And he absolutely was just in heaven with that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And my French grades went up appreciably after that, I think, which I'm sure was unrelated. I was just super good at French. So I think that was probably my first exposure to them in school. And then you could sort of see the progression of them ramping up. So, then going into junior high, which in Canada is grades 7, 8, and 9, and you could sort of see it starting to ramp up. So in junior high, we had a computer room that had, it was a room full of Apple IIs. And, I think all the schools loved Apples, of course, but I think the French schools loved them even more because, of course, they had the French language option that you could get with them. So ours all had that. These were all French immersion schools. And so they had the little switch under the keyboard that would switch in the alternate character set that had all the little accents on the E's. So the slash became a lowercase e with an accent aigu on it. And there was an accent clave and all the rest of it. And so the teachers, of course, loved that. That didn't really get used a lot. But, I guess they bought them because it existed. And so we had an actual computer class where I think it wasn't a dedicated course in the curriculum. So I want to say it was like part of math or something. That's funny now. I don't remember. I remember spending a lot of time in that room with my classmates, but I don't remember what the context was. I was just so excited to be there and be working on this stuff. So we did it must have been a computer class actually, because we were doing programming assignments and questions. So we'd get these little assignments like write a basic program that one that sticks out was there was a Pig Latin program that we had to write. So you'd type in a sentence and it would convert it into Pig Latin by swapping the last syllable and adding a to the end of it and stuff. So that kind of stuff was, yeah,
Canadian.
yeah. So that little bit of like those little string manipulation programs and stuff were really fun to write, and they made great assignments because they're easy to grade and easy to see on screen. And AppleSoft Basic had great tools for that. So and then at some point we got into Logo Writer. So we had which is a sort of a late version of Logo that actually did little sprites and stuff, and you could draw little sprites with different colors and stuff and animate them. So we had assignments around that, but a couple of us, would do the assignments in 5 minutes because they were usually quite easy, and then would spend our time working on little games in Logo Writer, which I still have that disc, but last time I tried to read it was no good. So that stuff might be gone forever. A great loss to the world, I'm sure.
Do you have one of the applesauce things?
I do, yes.
Okay.
I do not currently have it hooked up though, but I don't currently have an Apple II that I can attach it to. I've got an Apple II Plus at home, but I don't have a Disc 2 that I can hook up to, a disc card that goes in a slot and all that. So, I might try to rescue it though next time I have access to one. And then there was also at that same junior high, there was an Apple II in the corner of the math room. Mr. Pope, who was an awesome dude. There was something about all the French teachers who were not the French language arts teachers were awesome. Like they were all super fun. And I think, but the French language teachers were all super intense and uptight. I'm not sure why that was, but anyways, Mr. Pope was awesome. And he was not into computers, but he loved that some of us were. And so he wanted to kind of be around while we were doing stuff and watch what we were doing and watch what the machines would do. And, so he would open up the classroom for us after hours and he'd let us go in there and play with it and stuff. And one day a couple of us brought in Sam, the software automatic mouth, and we were, of a certain age. And so we were making it say, dirty things and making it say mean things about Mr. Pope, all in good fun. And he loved it. He just thought that was the funniest thing ever. And so he asked if we could set it up to say one of those mean things about him in the middle of his next class, just sitting in the corner, like waiting. So he asked us to set up this kind of time bomb. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it to work. weren't programmers at the time, so we didn't know how to, write a program that would use SAM to do that. All we were doing was playing with the little, interface that it had. So you'd type in words and it would say them, right? So we tried like putting in long strings of spaces and stuff to try and create a delay, but we couldn't figure out any way for it to create a SAM bomb, as it were, for later. So anyway, he was disappointed that we couldn't get that to work, but I still remember what a good time Mr. Pope was and what a good sense of humor he had. Let's see. So that was, junior high was just that, basically the Apple IIs. There was a lot of talk last time of Oregon Trail. We had it, but it wasn't like a big thing. Like at some point, I think the teachers used it, like if you finished your assignments or something, they would let you play it or something, but it wasn't like part of the curriculum, or it wasn't like an official thing in any way. And I wondered if that might be because it's basically the story of it's an American story, right? The whole setting. So I wonder if that might be why we didn't really use it, but we had it because it was like an educational game. And so it was good to have it, because what else could you have? So yeah, it existed in the classrooms, but we didn't really use it. Let's see. And then, in high school, you guys talked a lot about typing class. I enjoyed that too, because we also had a typing class with typewriters. So we had two full rooms full of computers, but the typing class was taught in a room full of typewriters. And I think that was mainly a budget thing, because they couldn't afford to give the computer room to the typing classes, because they needed it for the computer room and they couldn't afford to have another room full of computers. So since you don't need a computer to learn to type, they did it on those. I did not take any of those typing classes. Excuse me. I did not take any of those typing classes. I just, to this day, I still type with my own crazy messed up system that I have no idea what it is. I don't look at the keyboard, but I have no idea what my hands are actually doing. It just happens. But we had that at that point, it was PCs. So there was no Apple IIs in high school. So we had a room full of Olivettis, which were a PC clone that some people might know. They were a very low budget PC XT clone. They had CGA graphics in them, and they were sufficient for running Turbo Pascal, which is what we were doing with them. We had a programming class, which was all Pascal. And then there was like a second computer lab that I never had a class in, but it was all IBM PS2s. And so clearly some salesperson had gone around the school district and sold them a bill of goods on how great these IBM PS2s were. They were beautiful, a whole room full of these things on their official network and all their official architecture and everything. But they were so expensive that nobody was allowed to go in there. So the room was kept locked, and I never had a class in it. And I have no idea what the room was for beyond maybe showing the assistant principal how much money they'd spent. I don't know. The only reason I even knew it was there actually was because one of my first jobs was I had an after-school job in IT. So the school would hire students to maintain the computers in the school as an after-school job. And so I did that with like 3 or 4 other people. And so we would go into the fancy PS2 room that no one was allowed in just to run virus scanners and stuff periodically on them. And mostly what we did in there was play Scorched Earth, which was a super awesome artillery style, like Worms, nowadays, blow up the earth and collapse the dirt and shoot big weapons at each other. So it would run over the LAN on these PS2s. And so we would play these big, like 4-person games of Scorched Earth on Fridays after school on the extremely expensive IBM PS2s. So that was basically it. That's my entire history. And then, university was all Unix at that point. So we had VT100s and all of that stuff. So that was a lot, but there you go. My history of computing in school.
Yeah. It's funny how, I think we were all sort of roughly contemporary, but it does, we have still different stories.
And it doesn't take much of an offset for your experience to be quite different. Like a few years one way or the other, and maybe you completely missed punch cards or completely missed tape drives or whatever. So yeah.
I think so. For me, it was it was sort of interesting. At the end of, I basically I had no contact with computers, period, up until probably 5th grade when I moved from sort of like a rural area to a slightly more, of a city. And then, so this was just the tail end of elementary school, and there was an Apple II Plus. There's just one, and I was sort of, I guess in a sense, these aren't representative experiences anyway. So mine was non-representative, but so are they all. But at the school that I was in was actually, it was a sort of weird new agey thing, where essentially you were grouped into what they referred to as colonies. So the colonies were sort of like little grade clusters, and the way you did schoolwork was you would meet with you essentially had an advisor, and you would work out with them, like, these are the projects that you're going to complete, and everything was they were all organized into what they called contracts, but basically, like, that sort of specified what your task was, and if you completed that task, so there's sort of like there's a curriculum designed around like completing tasks in certain areas, and so you had to do a certain amount of history and a certain amount of whatever, but you had sort of choices, and so there were computer tasks, little programming things you could do, and so I would I went and did those little like AppleSoft programmings and stuff like that, and that I may have been almost the only one. I mean, like, I really do have the feeling like there was nobody else who cared about this at all. I would go there, I would sit at the computer, I would make my little drawings of cows or whatever it was that I was trying to do, and I was completely taken by this, and so I went through all of the possible contracts on this, and then as I recall, there was they got another one. There was, at some point, there was a room that had 2 of them in it, and so I would go in there basically after school, and I would be one of maybe a couple people that would be just sort of interested in going in there, and we would program or play Oregon Trail or play Sabotage or whatever it is. And that was, but it was, I got there soon enough that mostly nobody cared, so what the sort of end result was that people saw that I was in there all the time, and so I don't even know how I came to ask this. It's possible that somebody suggested it to me, but I was actually allowed to take the thing home over the summer.
Oh, goodness.
Are you sure you were allowed to?
Or just got away with?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Those
the
aren't the
weirdest
same thing.
Yeah.
I keep telling you that, Paul.
No, it was legit. And actually, I also had a acoustic coupler that I took home over the summer as well. So that was, I mean, that's insane in a sense, but there it was, so I had this thing for the summer and got to play with it, and it was very sad when I had to bring it back. This had to have been like 1981-ish or something, and so so basically I was just I was always using the school computer either at my house or like in school until I got an Apple II Plus for Christmas, because my parents observed, yes, okay, this seems to be a thing. And then basically I fell off using the school computers at all. So then, that was the thing I was going to comment on, was basically like I lost track of what happened in the school because I had my own at home, so why would I mess around with these ones at the school?
Yeah, we had our first home computer was an Apple II Plus as well, and it overlapped quite a bit with our use in junior high and elementary. So that was super fun because it was like having an edge. You played with this thing all day at home, and then you had it all day at school, and so you knew everything about it. You knew more than the teachers did about them, and it was definitely an advantage. You guys talked a lot about last time using them to write assignments, and that was something I actually wanted to talk about too, because I was also one of those people who started doing my assignments on the computer and almost got rejected for it. So I distinctly remember the first couple of writing assignments that I handed in printed instead of written, and had a lot of discussions with the teachers about that, because they had all these rules about how long things had to be and stuff, and it was all based on written pages. So they would say, oh, your assignment has to be 10 pages long. So then I hand in something typewritten, and it's either much longer or much shorter than that, depending on the font size that you chose. And it's a question of, well, okay, does this meet the rules or not? And so I did, as far as I recall, always succeed in talking my teachers into accepting them. But I do also recall that I took advantage of that to stretch the rules a little bit. I
course.
remember, yes, in an English class, which we called language arts, we had one particularly long assignment. It was something like had to be 20 pages or something. And that number was based on single-sided, handwritten, double-spaced. And I recall I could only get like 10 pages or something, but I used multi-scribe, which would print, dot matrix. And so it would do different fonts. So I did, I cranked up the font size a few points, and I cranked up the line spacing a few points, and I managed to stretch it out another 5 pages just doing that. And it was still plausibly sized. It wasn't like comically huge text, and I got away with that. But the teacher definitely side-eyed me when I handed that to him.
I'll just hold this, at arm's length and read it.
Exactly. Look, see, it's not big. It's just I'm holding it really close to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a thing. You guys also mentioned pets at one point in the last conversation, because I also wanted to touch on that. That was, I think I lied when I said the Apple II in that one French class was the very first one I saw. There was a pet in one of the French classes. And I think it was official. It was an official one because nobody knew anything about it or why it was there, and nobody ever used it. But what struck me about it was that even at that age, we sort of knew it was the crappy computer. Like nobody wanted to use it. Even those of us that were into computers, we all wanted to go use the Apple II. Somehow we knew, even though we were like 8 or something and didn't know anything about computers, but somehow we knew that one was crappy and the Apple IIs were good. So I think which is sort of the opposite of what I think you said, Carrington. You were excited about the pet because it looked
because the form factor, it looked like a real computer compared to my Model 1. Yeah. But if you guys had access to an Apple II and a pet, like the color and games would be the thing that would make it more exciting for a kid.
Yeah, probably the games, because we knew the Apple II could play games and we didn't know anything about pets. So that's probably why we just assumed it was better. But yeah, who knows? Real quick, people are saying in the comments too, we got a lot of Canadians in the comments today. I guess we're outnumbering you in the comments too. Everybody also all seems to be saying that, they weren't, Oregon Trail was never an official curriculum thing for anybody, except it was around, but it was never really official. Someone's calling out this thing called Cross Country Canada. Carrington, have you heard of this? Did you see that at all? Yeah, that's news to me too. I don't know what that is. It's being described as Oregon Trail with trucks, and something about teaching the resources of the country, but that's not something I've ever seen.
I do see there's an article in the Winnipeg Free Press from February 21st, 2019, being very excited that you can now play Cross Country Canada for free online. So if that is still the case, then I will put a link to that game in the show notes. So hunt it down while we talk.
Yeah, clearly it has cultural weight then if a local paper is talking
Winnipeg.
about it.
Winnipeg culture.
So maybe it was a middle of the country thing, a Saskatchewan, Manitoba kind of thing. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. They are the ones who would care about trucks, I guess.
We're going to have the flat roads.
Exactly.
But it is quite possible that there was something that was huge for a small number of years and then vanished again,
Yeah.
So, and also you could imagine that not making it onto the web,
Yeah, and school, nothing was interconnected back then. So if your school didn't happen to bring in a piece of software, you would have no exposure to it and never know it existed, even if, thousands of other schools used this thing. That's been my experience with Logo Writer, was that our school had it. And so we all used it. So in my mind, it's this big, super critical, important thing in the world of Apple II educational software. And I really struggle to find anyone else who's ever heard of it. Most people know Logo, but have no idea what this Logo Writer thing was. It was this. So it turns out that was a super niche thing that, just maybe our school district had, but it wasn't widespread.
Yeah, we definitely didn't have it. We did regular Logo stuff, but not Logo Writer.
Yeah.
Did it come with did it come with a sprite card? You mentioned a sprite.
No, it was all just software. So it wasn't super fast, but, I have distinct memories of we would make little like dirt bike tracks, and we'd make little dudes on little dirt bikes, like jumping over stuff. And we do little monkeys climbing buildings and stuff. Like it was really quite capable. But yeah, it wasn't fast. It wasn't smooth animation or anything. But just the fact that you could do it at all and with simple logo commands, you could define a sprite in their little graphical editor, create a sprite, and then just draw it with a single logo command. That was super powerful, frankly, compared to the other options that you had on the Apple II for trying to program anything with graphics. So the speed almost was irrelevant. Just the fact that you could do it at all was great.
Cool. In the comments, it's been noted that Cross Country Canada is actually sort of the Canadian version of Cross Country USA, and Cross Country USA I have come across, although actually only sort of in recent times. Like as I've been looking at the software that's people are selling on eBay or whatever, that I have come across. I think it actually even had a big map. I remember that in fact, actually, I think it may have been one of those ones that came on a disc that it was very colorful too.
Okay. I think I've heard Americans talk about. Yeah, I think I've heard Americans talk about that a little bit later, like a 90s thing. But I didn't know there was a Canadian version. Maybe that's why we haven't heard of the Canadian version, is because maybe it was a slightly later thing.
Yeah.
As well. There,
I haven't learned anything from the 90s onwards, so
yeah, no, me neither. Yeah,
yeah.
Like as a point of pride.
Yeah, it was definitely sort of interesting when people were talking about, like, well, here's what we did with computers in high school, here's what we did with in junior high, and then here's what we did in high school. That I basically, like, I became completely disconnected with all things having to do with computers in school in high school. So, like, I don't know what they did. I think my high school had a computer class. I think there was a typing room. I don't think I ever saw it. Because I had my Apple II at home, and
I wanted to get all the computer access I could, home,
yeah,
other friend's house, school, everything, all the computers all the time.
Yeah, I never liked PCs, but I loved that computer class where we got to sit in there and write Turbo Pascal on those terrible Olivettis. They were awful machines, but yeah, I was super happy to be taking it. Honestly, like anything, because it was fun. Anything that wasn't like another French language arts class or social studies or whatever, like to get to sit in that room and play with computers was for half an hour was the best part of the day.
Yeah. You said that there was the computer rooms and then the room full of typewriters. I wonder if the typewriters were also Olivettis, because it's a typewriter brand. So I wonder if they got it as a package.
That's a great question.
Throw in your typewriters if you buy our computers.
That's honestly almost certainly true. Yeah, because that's how these school districts work, right? They have a contract with these big corporations. So they probably had a contract with Olivetti to supply typewriters, and then they were like, hey, we have computers. And the school district was like, sold. Yeah, technically they were computers.
Some definition, a computer.
Exactly. Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned that you had that the school had a room of PS2s. I guess that was the high school.
Yeah.
And I worked. This wasn't a school thing, but I worked at a data entry company for a while. It was West Publishing. It was they do Westlaw. They're like this was at a time, sort of like a middle time when people would do this, but they just had a room full of people who typed. They would look at a judge's decision and they would type it up and put in the little written in markup. And every document was typed by two different people, and then it was cross-checked, and you were dinged on your rate if you had errors, and you would get you got sort of like paid more if you typed faster. So that is the reason why. And I learned how to touch type, essentially. Like it didn't have anything to do with my being able to use computers, but I kind of saw this as it was a good job. You could go in whenever you wanted to, just do whatever you had time to do. And I typed pretty fast. So
yeah, you guys had mentioned last time that some of you had taken typing classes because it was clear that computers were a thing and this was probably a good idea. I had some friends that did that as well. I had two friends that took typing in high school for that same reason. They thought, oh, well, computers are clearly here. So even if I have to learn it on these stupid typewriters, at least I'll be a good typist. And again, I think some of you mentioned, was it Blake who mentioned he was the only boy in the class? And it was the same here. That I knew two guys that were in that class, and they were the only guys in the class. But yeah, they both said the same thing. This is probably the best thing they learned in high school was how to touch type. Man.
Yeah, I used to be able to sort of just slap the keyboard and the word defendant would come out. It was quite, and in fact, actually, I think I've probably talked about this before too, but there's a weird sort of mental thing. Like it turned out that if I was reading the stuff, because it's pretty boring, it's like, bankruptcies and stuff, so if I was reading the stuff, my error rate would be actually much worse than if I was listening to books on tape, not paying any attention. Like, I would listen to my book, my fingers would do whatever they're doing, and I'd get my paycheck.
That's crazy.
Worked out pretty well. but it does seem like it shouldn't be possible.
Yeah, and I suppose this is still true to some still true to some degree today, but
Mhm.
back then data entry was like a great source of work for anybody who needed a job with for a little bit of money and low commitment and all that. One of my first jobs was also data entry technically for my dad, but it was for his veterinary practice, because they were moving to computers and they had 30 years of paper files, right? And somebody had to type that stuff in to the new computer database thing.
Mhm.
And so, there's no good way to do that besides typing it all in. And I'm sure, and he was one tiny business among millions and millions of businesses who had to get all of their stuff into the computer the first time. And then from there on, you could stay on the computer. But so that there was a lot of that work to do.
You
It's
were
kind of
human
frustrating when
OCR.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I hope that they got a lot of use out of it in that 8 years before it was all rendered useless.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, like now my sister has taken over the practice many years ago, and her constant challenge is migrating that data that I typed in 30 years ago, because they started on a PCXT, and medical software like dental and veterinary and that kind of software is all extremely vertically integrated. So there's like one or two companies that make that stuff, and it's all terrible because there's no competition in that space, right? Because it's a small market, and they, those types of businesses will buy whatever you're selling because they desperately need some kind of software that understands, veterinary drug names and all this other stuff, and, can handle, multiple pets per client. And then, they have these special needs that no software can really do except this one company that makes it. And then, as happens, that company goes out of business in 5 years. And so at least once, maybe twice, my sister has had to hire a data transcription company to copy all that data manually from some old software that's no longer supported to some new software. And if you're lucky, there's a tool, but it's not like mainstream. Like if you want to convert all your photographs from PNG to JPEG or whatever, there's a script you can run that'll do that. With this kind of software, it's so niche that nobody bothers to write a script like that. And so there are companies that transcribe all the data manually, and it's expensive and slow, but she's had to do that at least once because the software goes out of support, the companies go under, the hardware stops working, and you have to buy something else, and then the software doesn't run on the new thing, and it's constant.
Worst slogan ever.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's just, in hindsight, it's interesting because we all viewed this data entry as a one-time thing that, it's like, this is terrible, but we'll only have to do this once, and then it's in the computer forever. And it's like, well, no, now you're going to spend the rest of your career migrating it from terrible system to terrible system.
Fantastic.
There's a good question in the comments asking if they still teach typing in schools nowadays, or if people just expected to show up already knowing that. Like I would have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know.
But I mean, like, surely if they don't teach it, then you don't know touch typing. I mean, maybe no one thinks that's important, but we all liked it.
Yep.
Or we all liked the result, at least those of us who took it.
I mean, it could be that most kids nowadays learn it the same way I did, which is just that you just muddle your way through and you develop your own technique, whatever that ends up being. And if you do it enough, you get fast at it, or fast enough. But
right.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I wonder if they teach it. I mean, my nephew, who's 11, they're all touch screens. So they're doing everything on iPads. So typing isn't even that important to them anymore. At some point it will be, but it isn't yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I suppose, like, but you do have this keyboard layout in a particular, there's a sort of standard layout, and I guess you can sort of wipe your way around the keyboard and do entry on your phone. But
I mean, at some point they're going to have to type an essay, and then you'll need a keyboard, and then you better know how to type. But at the moment, they're not doing a lot of prose writing,
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting though. One wonders about the sort of like university professor tier group in 20 years or whatever it is. Like are they all going to be hunting and pecking their way through their academic papers?
I mean, yeah, maybe, but I do feel like that problem solves itself, because if you do enough of it, like, you just get better at it. You develop your own technique. Maybe you guys don't have this experience because you learned to type properly, and I never did, but I started out hunting and pecking, and eventually, you do that 10 hours a day for 10 years, and you start adding fingers, and you start developing your own kind of technique. And I mean, I type like 120 words a minute, and I was never taught how to do it. So it just sort of happens if you do it enough. I'm sure it would have been more efficient to be taught the right way to do it instead of evolving a technique. But yeah.
I think the reason I was thinking about data entry was just that I think PS2s must have been cheap. That was the because they were, or maybe not cheap, but maybe there was a sort of like a sales push on them or something, because this was a room full of PS2s, and when you have a room full of people typing at 120 words a minute, it's a very soothing sound on those like clacking keyboards.
Yeah, on IBM mechanical keyboards. Yeah. They were beautiful machines. I have fond memories. I liked just getting to go and sit in that room and run the virus scanner on them because, the machine, like the room smelled good. Like there was something very, you were in there and it was like, this is the future. These machines were so beautiful. But yeah, it was, I'm sure, a colossal waste of money because they weren't especially more capable than the Olivettis. And yeah, nobody got to use them really. So I'm sure it was a colossal boondoggle financially, but it was pretty.
I do remember in junior high there was a Apple IIe lab. That was one thing that I think that's probably come up at various points in the 200 whatever episodes that this podcast has had. But it was an Apple IIe lab, and they had probably 20 some machines in there or something, and that was basically like there was a guy he was a math teacher who was very enthusiastic about it, and so he pushed to get this lab there, and we had a Corvus hard drive that was the center of everything. Everything was networked to it, and so it was kind of neat because it was decentralized in a way. Like if you wanted to play Oregon Trail or whatever it was you wanted to do, you went to any of those computers and it would load it off the Corvus. And some of us very special people, were allowed to have our own volumes on there. So it was organized in little DOS 3.3 floppy-sized volumes, basically. And so, I had a place that I could go to any of those computers and store my programming on it. I never took a class that used these, but there was sort of open time that you were allowed to go in there, and so I would do that. And
cool.
I do remember writing a kind of a funny prank program, which was essentially it would bring up there was like a login screen, and so I mocked up the login screen so that in AppleSoft, so it would look like it was waiting for a login, but what it was really doing was sitting there pulling for a file on my volume, and as soon as I put that file there, then it would start making this high-pitched noise. So I could basically go to one computer on the network and put the file there, and then all the computers would start making this high-pitched noise. It was very very nice.
As soon as there's a network, someone will prank it.
That's right.
I think we spent probably a third of our time in university trying to come up with ways to do stuff like that on the network. What sort of shenanigans we could make other people's terminals do and things like that.
Right.
The X window lab was glorious fun because, of course, you can make someone else's X windows do whatever you want because the security is terrible.
Someone in the chat asked whether anyone had the Black Bell and Howell Apple IIs in high school. That was in fact what my first computer experience was on in that elementary school. It was in fact that's the one I took home, I guess, actually, was the Black Bell and Howell Apple II. So I spent quite a long time actually trying to hunt one down because, of course, they're somewhat rare. It's just an Apple II Plus that's
but you'd have
black
the nostalgia connection to it as well.
Yeah, I had needed to hunt it down and eventually did, but
you needed
now
to
you have
give
6.
it back.
Yeah, exactly. They were hunting you, I think, for it.
Right.
You got that story backwards. Yeah, I guess that must have been an American thing because I never saw one of those. As an adult, I've heard everyone say, "Oh, these were the educational Apple IIs or whatever," but I never saw them. We just had regular Apple IIs. They may not have had the French key option, which would also be why we wouldn't have seen them because the Canadian schools are probably all going for that one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, these were all Apple IIes that we had, never 2 Pluses, and yeah, I think they were regular, enhanced, or something 2Es, but we had 1 or 2 Platinums as well. I remember. But.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea with Bell and Howell was that that same sort of thing. We have a contract with the school already,
Yeah.
So
Oh, right, because they would have made the phones or whatever else the schools
Yeah.
were using. So,
the
yeah.
overhead projectors and the tape recorders and all these
Right.
things.
Yeah.
The mimeograph.
Yeah.
It's funny how much of our childhoods were actually driven by corporate contract agreements that were
right.
just legacy.
Because I'm sure it's so different now.
Yeah, exactly. But
We-
yeah,
we
and
had-
these, I think
Go ahead.
people often assume schools are making like in-depth educational choices or whatever, but it's no, they're just like any other big institution. They're making lowest resistance choices. Oh, here's a salesman offering us to solve our problem of thou shalt have computers for the kids. And if I write this guy a check, he'll make a computer lab appear. And that's what they're going to do.
That's right. But everybody's scared of it, so they're going to lock it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, that was super expensive. Okay, nobody touch it. Can't have those filthy kids using it.
When I was in graduate school, I had an experience that this reminded me of just a little bit, which is that I as I was sort of going into my sort of later years, I got a Duo, PowerBook Duo, because I was thinking, this thing is great. It's super small and light, and I can take it out into the park and I can write my dissertation on it and that sort of thing. And I had it for like a week or something, and it fell off a table and the screen went, totally became useless. I'm like, this is very depressing. And somehow, for reasons unknown, Apple did actually replace the screen for me. It would have cost me basically about as much to replace the screen as to buy a new one, but they did it for me. And then I never took it away from my desk again, so I had this nice portable, little computer that I would only use on my desk because I was scared to death of it. Very annoying. But so Carrington, I don't know if you had any further school thoughts you wanted to put in here.
I don't think so. The talking about logo earlier reminded me of a thing from my past. I think I've talked about it in an earlier episode where a teacher, wasn't even my teacher, it was a teacher from a different school, but part of the North York Board of Education, a Scottish guy, had hired me. It's one of my first times I got paid for programming to write some little logo programs, mostly to display stars. Like you'd have star mapping and play. And I'm positive it was because, well, one, he would drink this coffee that was 90% whiskey, and he would just get like blasted by the time I was done these things. But he would sit beside me, just drinking mugs and just slurring. It was hilarious. I mean, at the time I was just like, okay, probably getting paid $10 or something. But I think it was because he was supposed to assign these in class and had no idea like how to do any programming. So he hires a kid to write out like assignments that he can then just give out and say, does it look like this? It must be right. So that's how you become a programmer. Yeah.
There's a cleverness to that because he has proof that a kid can do this. So ergo, it's a good assignment for his particular kids.
But in regular logo, not like Logo Write or whatever. And it was all stuff like that, like draw shapes, like there'd be a star field and make those things appear, and then like draw lines between them and all basic logo things. So.
Was it the original Apple logo that was distributed by Apple?
It wasn't, because it was on his computer. I'd have to go over to the library, this big North York Board of Education library, and then he would bring in a computer, like a desktop computer he would set up. And so he lugged in this whole thing that he would then pack up when we were done. Like he'd stumble out to his car. It was like, the whole thing was just a total S show. But I don't even know what kind of computer it was. It was just a version of Logo. And like back then I was like, okay, I can do Logo. I can do a computer, whatever. It was probably some generic PC thing.
Okay.
I can do your Y2K fix.
Sure. Did that I could do. Like little scammer Carrington. Yeah, I'll take your money. Have another coffee.
We have a comment that I wanted to touch on. Pardon the pun. I wish I had done that on purpose. The comment is touch typing might be like cursive. So I wanted to ask: do they not teach cursive writing in school anymore? Does anyone know?
Oh, I bet they don't.
Yeah, I bet they don't either.
I was taught cursive.
Yeah, we learned it, but I remember they stopped teaching it. I mean, we learned it up till 4th or 5th grade or something, but at some point it disappeared and never came back. And we were never required to write assignments in it or anything. I turned into a printer at some point in late junior high or high school. I decided I liked it better and never went back, and I never had a teacher question it. So I just wonder if cursive just quietly went away and if they don't teach it anymore.
Yeah, because I almost never do cursive if I'm not like signing my name, which is essentially just my name in cursive.
Yeah, I don't even remember how to do it, because half of the letters are nonsensical. So you have to do it to remember, like the capital Q and the lowercase s.
So what would young kids think of it now if you see something cursive? Like, why are you doing all weird together letters?
Yeah, I wonder. I bet because they probably have no exposure to it. Computers don't print text that way, and that's their only exposure to the printed word. Yeah.
What was the purpose of cursive? Was it supposed to be faster?
I guess so. It is faster if you're good at it, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
And
I don't know.
It's probably somewhat elegant, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
you know, like calligraphy. What's the purpose of calligraphy?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it
What's
was
the purpose
considered
of
more
the letter Q?
Yeah, it was considered more formal, so I guess it probably came from that originally. That if this was culture, you were teaching your kids culture by teaching them to write fancy.
I think I originally thought of it as printing was like little kids stuff, and then cursive is like, oh, you're writing like an adult. But now I'm like, I can't. I used to write huge essays in school with hand. If I write half a page of stuff, my hand cramps like crazy.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
Like
I can't.
I have lost that ability.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, probably because we all have carpal tunnel from computers, but yeah, like for my YouTube channel, I do a lot of hand addressing of envelopes because I don't own a printer and I send stuff out, and I need to get a printer. It's terrible, but
get it. No, you need to get a handwritten font and then just go tape.
Exactly, papyrus.
Personalized.
Yeah, but yeah, no, 10 or 15 of those address labels in my hands are done. Like I have to take some ibuprofen and put ice on them.
You just tell people, for all you know, I really
terrible.
Practice writing exactly like Helvetica.
Yeah.
You don't know.
I have a story on that. So circling back to teachers wouldn't let us hand in assignments on dot matrix printers that you guys are talking about. So we had a math assignment where we had to draw some pictures. And I did mine in, I want to say, one of the 8-bit Apple II Paint programs, maybe Mac Paint. It wasn't Print Shop because it was higher res than that, but it was something. It might have been GEOS. Actually, it was probably GEOS. And I used a bunch of clip art that came with it. So there was a little train and a little house and some other stuff, and it was just all clip art. And it looked quite nice because it had been drawn by an artist, and I had just pasted it. And the teacher, this was Mr. Pope again, I think, he was super impressed with it, and he had asked how had I done it, because he'd never seen dot matrix printed artwork, and so you could see all the little pixels. This would have been on my Epson clone printer, and I told him in jest that I had drawn it by hand with a mechanical pencil. Making little dots.
So you're going through a pointillist phase.
Yeah, exactly. And he was so amazed, he didn't get the joke. And so he was like, oh, that must have taken so long. He was so super impressed. And then I felt bad, and I had to explain that I was kidding. And no, this was a computer, and this is how they draw. And it was turned into this whole thing. But yeah, we laughed about it, and he was impressed. So he accepted it for the assignment. But anyway.
Even though you're supposed to draw your own trains or whatever.
Yeah, I don't remember what the assignment was, but I was definitely, once again, kind of cheating by using computer clip art for it instead of, it was definitely not in the spirit of the assignment, whatever it was.
Oh, well. We had a feedback that was kind of, in this domain as well, from Brent, who was talking about growing up in the Ontario school system. And so, it was going to be possibly related to your experiences. But so what Brent said, what I really wanted to write you about is a computer system developed by the Ontario school system in the 1980s that you never mentioned on your show, the Icon computer. Do you know, are you familiar with this?
No. I am familiar, but only because I listened to a podcast. There's a podcast called Growing Up 80s, which is great if you're interested in 80s stuff. And it's by two Canadians. And they are in Thunder Bay, Ontario, I think. Kind of a small city. And so they have a very unique kind of Canadian experience because everything was sort of hyper local in those days. And they talk a lot about this Icon computer. And I had to go dig up pictures of it because I'd never heard of it either. But apparently in some corners of Eastern Canada, it was like a really big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that is the sort of like what we were just talking about, like because nothing is interconnected, something that is huge in your life may just not even be on the radar of people, one province over.
Yeah, I'll try and dig up the podcast of Growing Up 80s where they talk about the icon, because it's a crazy story. Like, it's this super skunkworks project. Like, some committee came up with this ridiculous list of requirements and paid some company to build a computer that would do all of this crazy stuff. Like, there's a trackball and a graphics tablet and a light pen, and it's just, they just threw every silly idea into this thing, and this company built it, and I'm sure it cost a fortune, and apparently they're terrible, but they did exist.
Yeah.
So one of these guys is a retro computing collector, and he's trying to find one. He's been searching for 20 years trying to find one of these things for his collection. He's never been able to find one. So
I've never even heard of it before.
Yeah, they must not have made a lot of them.
So in Brent's email, he describes it as they're all-in-one systems, combined monitor, keyboard, trackball, and I have seen photos of these, yeah. But and they were developed on a specification put out by the Ministry of Education. Brent says they came to my school around 1985 to 1987. We had a whole lab of them. They were a thin client with a central sort of teacher's server. So they shared a 10 megabyte hard drive and printer. They ran the QNX operating system and had 80186 CPUs. And there was a command line drawing interface, or command line there was a command line interface, and I remember a trackball drawing program. They have a little trackball built in, but it's, very forward thinking for 1985. but yeah, see, so Brent said they never existed outside of Ontario, as far as I know. So it's interesting. Yeah, I'd never, I had never come across this before this email.
Yeah. Oh, in the comments, it's being said that there's a Wikipedia page for the icon. So that's good to know if people want to know more about this thing or even see a picture of it. Because it's a hard thing to Google because the word icon is so generic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, check out the Wikipedia page for that. Maybe we can put that in the show notes.
It's also,
I think it can be forgiven.
186 is a weird CPU choice.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's one of those chips that you forget existed because it wasn't really used in anything. It's like
everything went right. I can't even think of a computer that used it. Like, everyone went from 86 to 286.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure that I had any further. I'm sure things from school eras will continue to pop up from time to time.
Canadian schools, of course.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
This is the All Canadian Schools episode.
I guess so. Yeah. Seems to be. Yeah. At some point, I will talk about being paid to program in junior high, but that will be a later episode, I think. So we can maybe move on to. Let's see. I guess we start. Maybe I even started the feedback, but we have gotten a little bit of feedback. And actually, one thing that we got in feedback was from Quasar on Twitter, who was very pleased to have heard that we were talking about the Sam Coupe.
I was fascinated by that last episode. Like, I was in the camp with you guys where I was like, this is a joke, right? This has to be a joke. Never heard of this thing that apparently has this massive cult following.
Yeah.
And I've literally never heard of it before. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, and I think so the person of Quasar dove full as many feet as Quasar has into this.
We don't want to make assumptions.
Exactly, we're inclusive here.
That's right.
All numbers of feet are beautiful.
But yeah, I mean, so what there's a little Twitter thread you can probably see on your own too. But the samcoupe.com site is run by Quasar, and what we were told was that I've been developing the system for 27 years, hardware, software, Sam Revival magazine, and more. At the time, I only followed it in the Specky magazine. The first reveal of its development was in issue 50 of Crash, and I wasn't able to buy one until early 1993. So it seems like it was a retro computer, from its inception.
From its launch.
but it's interesting. So anyway, it does exist. I believe. I'm in the believer.
I just want to commit to the bit. Like, I don't know.
Did they get to you too? How much are they paying you?
Yeah, I'm dubious.
Yeah. Let's see what else. We got.
I thought for sure everyone would say it's big in Canada. Oh, you wouldn't know it.
Right. We got email from Nathaniel who said that he was listening to the show the other day, and out of the blue, we started talking about the RetroBridge BBS software that he wrote.
Oh,
So that's kind of
must
neat.
be a nice experience. Like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Hopefully we said nice things.
Yeah. Well, and he said since I wrote it, I've had 0 conversations about it with anyone who could appreciate it on any level. so that's kind of neat. But yeah, no, and it was one question that we had was whether it's Mac only, and it isn't. It's also very modular, object oriented. So anyone could write an interface. Recall what this was essentially was a way to get your Mac to connect as if to a BBS to the Macintosh Garden and to other places that have modules written for it, so that you could download things as if you were calling a BBS back in the day. But
it's a super amazing concept. I love it.
Yeah, so it's super cool. And it actually also tied into the question about whether, when we were talking about retro development, whether people did retro development of things that are not games, or in fact, actually, if you were interested in doing development on a retro platform, doing the development part, if your nostalgia is the development, on the 9-inch screen or whatever. And he said that, yeah, he did some of that stuff, actually using Think Pascal on a Mac SE.
Oh, wow.
And it was pretty fun.
I could almost see myself doing that. I mean, I really liked ThinkC on the late 68K and early Power Macs.
Me too, definitely.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite IDEs. So I could see myself going back and writing a little something in ThinkC just for the lulz.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like, for the first week, that might be fun.
Yeah, we'll commit to 50,000 hours. Exactly.
Yeah. As to the second question, so we've got Jeremy Rand in the comments again today, and he's been talking about working on a Markdown reader and or editor, I'm not sure which, for the 2GS. So that would be an example of a non-game retro development project. I've not heard of anything like that isn't specifically a utility that will be useful for bridging gaps like that. Like if you want to write, Markdown documentation for your game or whatever, but because people want to write stuff that's fun, and I don't know if anyone thinks writing word processors is that fun. And then the end result is going to be something nobody wants to use because it's going to be objectively worse than the worst modern word processor. TextEdit that comes with your Mac is 8 billion times more powerful than the best multi-scribe version that ever existed on the Apple II.
The Markdown processor, that's a good idea because it is it's sort of specifically very low requirements.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Yeah,
especially
and I could
as a reader, because there's so much documentation out there in Markdown format. Be able to just now it just bridges it to be able to be used on a 2GS.
Yeah, there's probably a topic in there somewhere for a future show about how these modern high efficiency formats like Markdown and so on, where they're trying to make things smaller again because we got a little overboard there with XML and some of that kind of stuff. Now people are trying to kind of swinging back the other way and trying to make things light again. That stuff then becomes useful on retro computers because they're light. So there's interesting opportunities there for discussion.
There was a brief moment when there were phones that had web browsers, but they were not powerful. And so there was a time when, there was an attempt to scale things back down again so that unpowerful machines could read them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But we've lost that
and
again.
Shockwave games took over. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Flash ruined everything and SSL ruined everything. I mean, as soon as SSL came in, and that was the death knell for retro computers. When it's going to take you a year just to calculate the code needed to open this website. It's like, well, okay, that's it then.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have other feedback, but I think that'll do for this time. We can save some for next time. So maybe we can turn now to our items of interest and news. And Carrington, you have the first of those.
Okay, I have a fun one. We have frequently talked about companies that still use old computers, like in their factories, in their whatever. And I have an example of a good one because one company you may have heard of called NASA is still using a computer from the 80s, and it's broken down, and they're struggling to get it up and going again. So as of the 17th, it was supposed to be back up That doesn't seem to have worked. They're still struggling with it. So it's a computer technically from the 70s, but it's been used in the since 1990 or whatever in the Hubble Space Telescope. So a payload computer there, which is an NSSC-1, which is a great thing. That's the NASA Standard Spacecraft Computer. Don't you want one now just from its name? Like, come on, it's amazing. So it was developed in like 1974. It's an 18-bit computer because NASA, because of course they said like that'll be 4 times more accuracy than a 16-bit machine. So let's do it. Okay, why not? So it's an 18-bit computer from the 70s, and it's got some trouble, and it booted up into like safe mode or whatever, and they're having some difficulty with it. So they're trying to get it fixed. The neat thing is you program for this using an assembler loader on a Xerox XDS 930, like a 24-bit mainframe, and they still have to use like an emulator for that. It turns out to write code for this thing. Like it's so old. It's awesome, and it's in space. They're like, okay, let's fix this 18-bit space computer. So this is my favorite of the old, like companies still using old tech. Like forget the like the impact printer at the back of a factory. I like this one. Okay, look up, fix that. So struggling with it, and I love it. So that's it. Old computers.
Boy, if I had a dime every time I've been asked to fix an 18-bit space computer. Oof.
Yeah.
Such a common problem.
It's like it's like an order of magnitude harder problem when the computer that you're trying to work on is orbiting the Earth,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, so if I had to guess, and this is total speculation, I don't know anything about this, but the extra 2 bits are probably like checksums. I know a lot of space hardware, they need redundancy on everything. And so they will they'll do things literally like checksum every single memory address, just in case a cosmic ray hits one, and flips a bit, because that could cause, the flight navigation to be off by, a tiny amount, and then it crashes or whatever. So they're super intense about some of that kind of stuff. And they do everything, it all has to be hardware redundancy, not software. So they can't just, check the bits after the fact, because again, one flip-flop burns out from a cosmic ray hitting it, and now the computer can't be trusted to look at its own data. So that all the redundancy has to be at the hardware level. There could be something like that. But yeah.
So anyway, Lockheed Martin or whoever, I think that's the ones who did the Hubble. They picked the old 18-bit space computer, and now they got to fix it. And I love it. I love everything about it. So.
Very cool.
That was it. Really short one. It's just like old computers still being used in space.
Excellent.
There's a comment in the stream there about a story that went around a while back about the U.S. nuclear missile silos still using 8-inch floppies. Mm-hmm. And that was true. It's probably still not true, but it was true until fairly recently that they all depended on some software that was only on 8-inch floppies, and there was some relatively valid reason for that, again, because it was like these were certified for radiation resistance or something, and to upgrade it, they would have had to develop a whole new system and get it recertified and stuff. So it was better just to keep the old stuff working or something. But not as ridiculous as it sounds, but still relatively ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, and I think there was another thing. There was I'm sure we talked about this when it was sort of new, but there was a satellite, or not a satellite, but it was like a one of those Voyager probe type things, that was sort of out doing science in a direction away from Earth, and there was some discussion of like trying to wake it back up, and I think they may have succeeded, but it was kind of like an amateur effort of some kind, anyway, whatever. I don't remember enough of it to talk about it, but maybe I'll dig it up at some point.
Looks like reading more about this, there's a 386 coprocessor that they attached to this thing in 1999. There was originally a different coprocessor in 1993, and then they attached, but it still uses this NSSC1, but it now uses they can do things on this 386 coprocessor. Just 386, why not? It's got 6 times the memory, but I think it only has 64K memory to start with. So, but it looks like it's the actual one of the primary computers that's having the problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool, love it. Space computers.
Excellent. Right, so my thing was this. So this is it's just another little thing. In fact, I mentioned this last time, but this is Foztex on. Let's see, what is his name? Chris something. Do we know his name?
Yes, I do. It's slipping my mind though right now.
Okay, fantastic.
So I guess no, we don't know.
Yeah, Foztex is what we'll refer to him as. But yeah, so Foztex posted this. He's actually pretty active on one of the subreddit groups, Retro Battle Stations, I think, and frequently, I think he may actually be the one who sort of sets up the contests that happen at various times. So he has a thing where it's you're supposed to, is like basic day or whatever, or anyway. But so this for 5.25 inch floppy day. He set up a thing that he said he's been meaning to do for a long time, which is a multi-format cross-platform floppy. And this is actually much more of a project than just like a flippy disk where you've got like the Apple version on one side and the Commodore version on the other. This is actually on a single side of a 5.25 inch floppy that will boot on an Apple, an Atari, and a Commodore.
How?
Yeah, and so I think that's actually a pretty cool thing. And so essentially, the story, he's sort of written up the story. Essentially, he was working on the Victor 9000 and wanted to try to sort of work out. I think he basically got the hardware connected, the SuperCard Pro connected, in order to decode the Victor's output. But then he thought, well, while I've got this going, I want to see if I can make this work. And it's an interesting little hack. So essentially, the two of these formats will boot off of track 0. So somehow I think both the Atari and the Apple had to share track 0, and so he had to make it so that as it spun around, the Apple would recognize the Apple stuff and the Atari would recognize the Atari stuff. And then and they all have sort of like bit mapped sort of sectors in use maps. So he, and he basically on the, he in the Apple side, he marked off all the Atari stuff as being in use, and on the Atari side, he marked off all the Apple stuff as being in use. And it's pretty cool. And so there's a little video of him like taking the disc and sort of booting one computer and moving it to the next computer and booting that computer and then moving it to the next and so forth. And it does start up. It actually starts up in full ProDOS on the Apple II, which is amazing. So anyway.
Oh wow, this video is great. He's all three monitors right next to each other, and he literally boots. Wow, that's really cool.
That's amazing. That's a phenomenal. I mean, I don't know if it's useful, but I've never seen anything like that. That's an incredible achievement. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Just setting up that display is impressive. He's got all those computers lined up on a nice background and everything. That was a lot of work too. So all three of these machines then use the same encoding. They must all be, is it GCR? Is that the flux encoding versus like PCs use MFM or whatever?
I'm not sure actually. Let's see. I don't think that they do though. So the Apple II uses GCR, but I think that the other ones don't, and so you essentially you need to have something that can write pretty esoteric formats, that you built yourself out of fluxes, handcrafted fluxes.
Because that was always a big barrier. Like there was never going to be a tool that would let you read your Apple II's floppies on a PC because literally the flux encoding is different. The drive isn't physically capable of reading it.
Yeah.
But he's got some way to write both encoding flux types on the same disk.
Yeah. So he has a little image of the disk map, and so the inner tracks are Atari, the middle green tracks are Commodore, the outer tracks are Apple, and part of track 0 is one format and another part is another format.
How much data is left for each computer? You do this,
just enough to boot it, maybe.
Yeah,
that's pretty wild, though. That is a great stunt.
Yeah,
but so it's a SuperCard Pro. Like the SuperCard Pro is the thing that allows you to write it back out.
Okay. So the card must be capable of talking to all these different drives. Okay, boy, that's great.
That's impressive.
Yeah, let's see. Anyway, yeah. I think it's part of his discussion talks a little bit about this thing that ProDOS does actually, which is that's always been kind of neat. the way ProDOS works is essentially there's a boot. Well, all Apple II stuff. There's a sort of like the card will bring in a sector, and then it will run that sector, and that sector will stage up the rest of the DOS.
Right.
And ProDOS was built. ProDOS is sort of an evolution of the sophisticated operating system that was for the Apple III. And so, in fact, actually, ProDOS has this kind of like ability to boot Apple III as well. So like there's sort of like two different boot blocks depending on like which computer is booting it, and it'll either run one of them or the other one. And I think that exists. I think that's still like a thing even in later ProDOS. Like there's a sector that's kind of not used for anything because it's the Apple III boot sector. But so it is quite possible to have a disk that will boot, a single disk that will boot on Apple III or an Apple II and into the appropriate operating system.
We're being asked in the stream that the assumption then is that all these computers use the same number of sectors and the same number of tracks, but actually they don't. And I think that would actually not be necessary as long as you have them spaced out enough so that they don't overlap. And then whatever physically maps to the same area on the disk, as long as each OS has that area marked as used, like you were saying. So even if the encodings are different, like if one of them is using MFM tracks, then as long as those, whatever physically that area maps to as GCR tracks, if those are marked as in use so that the drive doesn't try to touch them, then it'll work. So you probably need a little bit of space between them for safety. But yeah, that's boy, that's great.
Trying to share stuff on the same track, I think that is what had to happen for track 0 is lucky. I mean, like it's lucky that the Apple II doesn't care if you have garbage. If at least eventually it spins around to something that is readable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And are those all soft sectored? I'm not sure. Some of them might not be.
I think they are.
Okay, because that would also go to your advantage. Like if the Atari was hard sectored, you could give it the hard sector and then let the Apple find its own sector 0 somewhere else. That would actually make it easier. This reminds me of a great Kansas Fest entry that we had one year.
Exactly.
Yeah, where was it Forrest who did this? Where he put two different floppies on the same, two different disk images on the same floppy by interleaving them. So there was two different track 0s that were offset, and so whichever one the drive happened to see first as it was spinning, it would then boot that floppy, assuming that subsequent tracks or subsequent sectors were relative to that one. It was a great trick. So it was kind of random. Like it was just you put it in and it would boot a different virtual floppy each time. It was just whichever track 0 the drive happened to see first on that or whichever the sector. What do you call it? The prefix, the prologue, whichever sector 0 prologue it happened to see first is the one it would boot. So yeah, that was a really neat thing.
Yeah, he said he was inspired by the records, that would do this, where there'd be like a blank spot.
Multi-spirals.
In mechanical engineering, there's something called a multi-start thread, which is basically the mechanical version of that. If you look very closely at like the neck on your juice bottle, those are typically multi-start threads. There's actually multiple places where there's part of this helix comes down to nothing. And what that means is no matter how you stick the cap on, it'll start turning properly. You don't have to like find the thread. So it sort of makes it more convenient. Anyway, it's same idea, but for magnets.
For juice.
How do they work?
Yeah. It's a surprisingly high-tech thing. Look at the neck of your water bottles next time. It's actually an extremely sophisticated thread that's on them if you have an appreciation for mechanical things.
Excellent. All right. Let's see. Quinn, you have the next thing.
I do. So I'm going to share this tab real quick for the benefit of the live stream and to the eternal frustration of the podcast listeners. So this is A2IO, and it is a Apple II Bluetooth game port receiver. And good friend of mine, 4am, texted me this the other day. He's like, OMG, have you seen this? And I was like, no. And I was like, OMG, shut up and take my money. And I immediately clicked and bought it, and it just arrived. So I was just playing with it this morning. And Chris Torrance has done a video about it. And it's what it is it plugs into your joystick port on the Apple II, and it interfaces with an app on your smartphone. iOS or Android, and it gives you a virtual paddle and or joystick and or tablet. So it'll emulate a koala pad, or it'll do paddles, or if you have a Bluetooth game controller like an Xbox controller, you can connect the Xbox controller to your phone using Bluetooth, and then it will connect that to the device. So you can pair like an Xbox controller to this device as well with this app. So it's extremely clever. I've never seen someone do anything quite like this before. As to the actual usefulness of it, I'm not sure. So one of the neat features it has is it has motion control. So using the accelerometer in your phone to simulate a joystick. So I tried this morning to play Spy Hunter and Moon Patrol with that. And it worked as well as modern motion controls do, which is to say not at all. But it was extremely entertaining, and it's a very cool device. It does just work, which is nice. You just plug it in and you launch the app, and it just works. It connects it, finds it somehow. I don't even know. Bluetooth is normally a nightmare, but this thing just works. And it's awesome. I don't know that it's solving any problem per se. I would probably just plug in my Apple II joystick if I want to play a game, but this thing is really cool, and I'm glad I bought it just to support, these kinds of efforts. Because it's a neat thing.
And also, like we always say, if you don't get something when it's available, it will be gone and gone forever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was $50, like whatever, if I get a couple hours of amusement out of it, it was worth it. It's a really small thing, really portable. I don't have a Bluetooth gamepad to try it out with, because I feel like that could be the real killer app for this if it works well. If there's no latency or anything, that would be an awesome way to play Apple II games. But I don't actually have one to try it, so I'll try and find one of those somewhere. Because I would love to play Apple II games with a modern Xbox controller. That would be great, because they are nicer to hold in your hand for long periods than the Apple II joysticks were.
Is it, so you mentioned that you can use an accelerometer mode. The only time I've ever tried to use an accelerometer is when the phone itself is also serving as the screen. So you have to somehow keep it. It's got to be flat so that you can. But is it possible to just hold the phone vertically? I mean, like a joystick, and sort of wave it around that way? Because it seems like that would be not bad.
Yeah, not exactly. So here's the app. I can show it on my camera for the streamers. And so you do have to hold the phone flat, and then you tilt it kind of like this. You're holding it sort of like a pizza box out in front of you, and you're tilting like this. It works. It's a little awkward, but it works better than you would think. So I played Spy Hunter with this for a while, and I was actually starting to get the hang of it. Like, it's not too bad. Mostly there's just a lot of hysteresis in it, which is the problem that all motion controllers have. It's such a noisy data source that the system has to be extremely sure when you're changing direction before it does it. So it's not super sensitive to the position of the phone. So it's not really good enough to play games, but it is a lot of fun. The tablet mode on it is pretty cool too. I played Moon Patrol with that, and for that you put your finger on this little grid that's on the screen, and you drag your finger around, and it sets the joystick to that position, which is surprisingly effective. So I just set this on top of my Apple IIc, and I was just playing Moon Patrol by dragging my finger around, and it works. It's kind of a neat thing. And if you had like a koala pad app that you wanted to play with, I think this would be awesome. Like, this would be a perfect substitute for that. So
I agree that I think the killer version is to use a modern Xbox controller or something like that.
Yeah.
That is huge appeal to me.
Yeah.
I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find one somewhere. I used to have one, but I don't have it anymore. So I'll have to try and find one and give that a shot. But and what's cool also is that the device is absolutely tiny. I mean, it's like the size of your thumb. It's so small. Like, I can, showing it to the folks on the stream again here, I can like hide it behind my thumb. It's so tiny. So
maybe your thumbs are huge.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just really far away from the camera. But yeah, that's appealing how just the size of it, it's so nice and compact. So you can throw it in your Kansas Fest bag and bring it along.
Of course, it's
Also, I like things that do double duty. So with something like this, you can have a game controller I'm using for more than one thing. Like, I like stuff that I can use in multiple places. So if I could have an Xbox controller I'm using on multiple things, I don't need to have a separate dedicated joystick for my retro computer. So I like that.
Yeah. I don't know if it supports mice. That would be an interesting question because I would love to use it with GEOS, for example, with a modern Bluetooth mouse, because the Apple IIc mouse, while charming, is fairly terrible as a mouse. So it's got the crappy rubber ball and the button is stiff and awkward and the whole thing is clunky and heavy. It's not a good mouse. So yeah, I'll have to see if it supports mice because that would be really neat.
And I'm still taken by this. So I haven't ever, even attempted to look at what kinds of things you can program on a modern phone with sort of an accelerometer. But can they detect translation, like physically, or is it only orientation that they really?
So yes, but the translation is not sensitive. So there's because then you're relying on GPS and the locational tracking that you get with Wi-Fi signals and cell signals. So it's not very high resolution. So it's mostly tilting and rotation. The rotation, so they have a gyroscope for rotation and then accelerometers for tilting. And those two are very sensitive, but as I say, they're extremely noisy input devices. If you've ever played like Nintendo Wii games, it feels like that. Like they're basically terrible. You swing your hand around and the game does very vaguely what you told it to. And if the game does its best to cover that up and give you a good time anyway, but it's definitely not a precision control device. So
you could write a game just using the drop sensor. Boom, pick it up.
Yeah. Oh, Tetris.
Very expensive game.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if you could get like an actual big joystick, like basically a big wooden thing or a big thing that you stick on it, and then you put the phone on top of that and you move the joystick around, but it does sort of tilt it as you do, So
it's very efficient.
Yeah, maybe. All right, cut a ping pong ball in half and then balance the phone on that. And then suction cup a stick to the top, and then it'll rock on the ping pong ball. See, this
I like this plan. See, this is why Kansas Fest is amazing. Now go do it.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. That'll be someone's Hackfest entry, hopefully this year. But yeah, the app is pretty nice for such a niche product. You can see on the screen here we've got little screenshots of what the paddle and stuff looks like. The paddle simulation is quite good actually. You can play Sabotage perfectly fine with it and that kind of thing because paddles are easier to map to touchscreen.
Yeah, I was going to mention that the app looks great. I mean, a lot of care went into using the actual Apple II font in the green and the paddle. You can see the paddle.
Yeah, exactly. It does suffer from the problem that all touchscreen game interfaces do, which is that if you're trying to play the game while not looking at it, what happens is your thumb drifts, and then you're pushing because the joystick buttons are mapped, are just spots on the screen that you have to tap, and while you're playing the game, your thumb drifts, and then you're tapping a blank spot on the screen that isn't the button, and then you die because you didn't push the button in time. This is a problem that all mobile games suffer from as well. Games that try to use virtual D-pads on the screen, you have to constantly be keeping your thumbs from drifting off of the area where they're supposed to sit because you can't tactilely feel where the buttons are. So that's not this app's fault. That's just a problem with touchscreen devices for input.
I wonder if it would be possible to have like a phone case, essentially, that just has a couple of holes where your thumbs go, so that you can feel.
You have different covers for different games.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. You can buy for mobile gaming. You can buy suction cup joysticks that stick to your screen and give you something that you can feel.
So you guys, you're reinventing the Intellivision, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
This was already done.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's a neat thing anyway. So I recommend if people are at all interested in playing with Bluetooth stuff, this is a fun little toy.
Cool.
And the app is written in Unity, and it's the free version of Unity because you can tell because of the splash screen. Being in the business, I happen to know that. But so I don't know if the code is online somewhere, but it may be. And if it is, then that's awesome because then you'll be able to easily write your own code to talk to this thing. So if you want to write, cool Bluetooth stuff for your Apple II, this would be a super awesome way to do that. So hopefully he has open sourced the code somewhere for the app.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm just wondering. I mean, so this is a little 9-pin, a little 9-pin thing, DE9, whatever the appropriate name for that is.
Yeah.
And if it's general enough, you might well be able to plug this into anything that has a female DE9 port, and if you can use the open source to communicate with whatever computer that is, maybe this could be more generally used too.
That is an excellent point. Yeah, that I hadn't thought of. Because yeah, the Apple II joystick port is extremely simple. It's basically a GPIO. There's a couple of analog signals and a couple of digital signals, and you could very easily read and use those signals on like an Arduino, for example. So if you wanted to add Bluetooth to your Arduino, this would be a super easy way to do that. And it comes in two options. This is the version that has the DE9, but you can also get the 16-pin DIP style for the 2 Plus and 2E. So that version would go on a breadboard, for example, and you could easily use this in your own projects. Yeah, even with his app, actually, which would be cool.
Very nice. I may well have to get one of these.
And it's also cool that it has an iOS app, I should say, because most of the time these homebrew devices only have an Android app, because Android makes it a lot easier to write these kind of sketchy homebrew apps. You know, if you try to write an iOS app, it has to go through iOS certification and stuff, and it's a whole hassle that most people don't bother with. So it's cool that there is an iPhone version.
Nice.
I like it. Get it while you can.
All right. And speaking of that, Carrington, you have the next thing.
Some people will tell you that when a thing comes out for a retro computer, you should buy it while it's available, but that's a bunch of hooey. Apparently, you never listen to those people.
You just said that.
It wasn't me. It was totally. I think it was the Retro Mac cast. Blame those guys. Totally, John. So, CFFA 3000 is back, but this time through Reactive Micro, who have licensed it. So how cool is this? So an Apple II product has now been licensed, and it's back available on the market. So it's something that hasn't been available for a while. $225 gets you, or $225 gets you the CFFA 3000 and the what used to be the optional little switch. So you get the whole package, and it's available once again. So I think that's awesome, because usually, rule of thumb, some people might say that if you don't get a hobby thing, once it goes away, it's just gone. But this, I guess, is proven popular enough that it actually got licensed. It's the first time I know in modern times of something like this, like somebody licensing a product and bringing it back out for an Apple II. So it's really cool. So it's available now. If you don't have one, you can get one.
This thing is awesome. So Henry likes to say how he's not technical at all, but he managed to keep doing stuff like this. And this is very much him using his powers for good, because he has this ability to bring smart people together and, glue the pieces together to make a product happen like this. Or another recent example is he's been cloning the Transort GS card, which is this absolutely unobtainium card that everyone wants. But he knows how to find the person who can reverse engineer that card, and then find the person who can build that card, and then glue them all together and offer it for sale. And that's super valuable. So I'm really glad that Henry's out there doing this.
Yep. And I think right now it's basically just a clone. There's some thought about maybe adding things like support for the WAS format and things that would allow it to handle copy protected images and things. But at the moment, it does all the same stuff that the CFFA 3000 always did, which was a lot, and it was great, but it does predate the WAS.
Yeah, which is plenty though, and is like if you don't have one, you should have one. Like this thing is amazing.
Yeah.
Plus, this frees up.
Paul?
Yeah.
Paul, how many of these do you have?
What? 2.
That's very few for Paul.
I have one, but I don't have a computer to put it in, because I bought one in the last run because it was supposed to be the final run ever. So I'm like, well, I better just get one, because someday I might want it and it will be unobtainable.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's the same reason, Quinn, I bought your ROM. I don't have a 2C.
Yes.
Maybe one day I'll have a 2C Plus and I will need that ROM.
I appreciate you setting me up for that. Your check is in the mail. So I think in a previous episode, I actually said that my ROM is no longer available, so stop asking me for it. I lied because I forgot that I sent an email to Henry about that ROM, because he asked me, hey, can I sell your ROM in my store if you don't want to make them anymore? And I was like, sure, go for it. And that happened quite a while ago. So on Reactive Micro, you can also buy the Megabeep ROM for the 2C Plus.
When people tell you things won't be available long term, you should not believe them.
Yeah, none of us accounted for Henry. So yeah, if segue, shameless plug, if you want to buy the Megabeep ROM, you can also buy it from Henry. I don't get a commission or anything. I just said you can have it because whatever. But so it is still available.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. I'm next. Okay. So the thing I have is not much, but I just came across this and it just seemed kind of interesting. It's called ASCII Dent. And it's a game. It says open world sci-fi game with a design completely made by text characters, and so it's a modern game. It doesn't really actually have any it doesn't run on retro computers. I think you would get it on Steam or whatever, but it's completely made with ASCII characters. So there's a little character, little guy with an O for a head. It looks like it's basically IBM PC characters, but with many different colors. And as you can see, it's sort of going up and down a ladder, and there's a terrain, and the terrain is made out of things that are like stones, and you can tell they're stones because they say stone. They're made of the characters STONE. But it's pretty pleasing actually. And it does have a retro feel to it, even though it's not even though it doesn't run on retro games. And it's very retro platforms, and it's very it's definitely sticking to the concept. That everything on the screen is just an ASCII character in some color.
And we should say it's 7-bit ASCII even. Like it's not using special. It's not like Dwarf Fortress that's also ASCII, but uses like all these crazy PC high-bit characters, the little happy faces and stuff. This is like things that an Apple II can display, except different colors. So that's pretty awesome. And so the people not on the stream are missing out because we're watching video of it here. It's extremely sophisticated. Like there is a lot of animation happening. Everything's very smooth. A lot of very detailed action happening. So this is quite a sophisticated looking modern platformer just done with ASCII.
But it actually does seem like, apart from the fact that there's some movement of like the window that you're looking at this through that's smoother than you could do on a something that actually was like 80 by 24 or whatever, you could probably replicate much of this on a fast PC.
Yeah, I mean, the characters are not obeying the grid. You can see in this, the characters are moving smoothly in X and Y. But aside from that, everything else looks like you could do it.
I love this when you kill a little thing. You get the letters BLOOD bouncing away from it.
The word blood flies off of the enemy. That is pretty great. So clearly it has a sense of humor as well, which I love. Yeah, this is excellent.
Anyway, so check it out if you have an opportunity. It's I think currently like a pre-order. It's not quite it's in sort of like whatever the Steam advanced access mode is.
Yeah, but it's buy it now for $10, it says, and this looks easily worth the $10.
Yeah, it's clearly at least mostly a labor of love, but you can also provide $10, and you can also start it in Russian.
Nice.
And it's localized for Russian. It feels like if you don't mind playing NetHack, then I think you would like this. Like there's a certain Zen mindset you get into playing NetHack where after a while you just don't even see the symbols anymore. Like you just know that like the lowercase b is a dog, and so you see a dog when you see one. And if you can get into that mindset, this game will definitely appeal.
It took me so long to get there. Forever when I played NetHack, I was like, I can't. It's driving me crazy. Eventually you can just see it and play, but it took me a long time to get there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Did we get the reference to the word for money? What are we talking about?
The reference...
I'm reading the chat. You get a coin and it says Piastra.
I do not get that reference.
Yeah. Okay. But apparently it's a clever reference.
Okay. Does the person who asked would they care to explain the reference?
French Canadian slang for $1.
For $1, it's Cajun. I think of it as Cajun French, not French Canadian.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, it's not French Canadian. Okay,
interesting.
Cool. It could be French Canadian, but I think of it as a Cajun word. It's a Cajun word for calling the U.S. dollar. I think it's a Spanish thing or something.
Okay, never heard it.
All right, and then I guess the last thing is Quinn's.
Yeah, so I don't have anything to share for the stream, much to the relief of the listeners. But so there is the link in the show notes, however, that I will be putting in for
go anywhere.
Yes, because I did not quite get it edited in time. So, but it will be live by the time the show goes out. It is a blog post about my experiences with the Mockingboard 4C+, which I received a couple of weeks ago, and I installed it. And so I wrote a blog post about the process of installing it and getting it running and stuff. And so I can talk a little bit about that here. For anyone who doesn't know, of course, the Mockingboard was a sound card for the Apple II, and there is a modern clone of it called the Mockingboard 4C, which was developed by Ian Kim, the South Korean wizard that is only rumored to exist, and yet somehow these magical devices keep appearing on eBay from some guy named Ian Kim. And I sent money to this mysterious eBay, and this device appeared, so he seems to be a real person. And so the 4C is a Mockingboard clone. It's a clone of the Mockingboard C, which was kind of the main one that goes inside an Apple IIc. And the way it works is you take out the CPU and you plug this board in where the CPU goes, and then you plug the CPU into the board. And so it intercepts all the CPU signals and basically makes the Apple II think that it has a Mockingboard C in slot 4. And so, which is where most Apple II software assumes it's going to be. And it works flawlessly as far as anyone can tell. And so this is a version for the Apple IIc Plus, and that's the new thing here. So it's not yet widely available, I don't think. He did a short run of them that someone, actually it was Blake who tweeted at me about it. And so I immediately bought it, and then they disappeared again. So I think that he's not yet on full production on those, but the 4C version for regular Apple IIcs you can buy. And it's amazing. So it was very easy to install. It's got the original Yamaha sound chips on it, the AY380 something 10 or whatever. There's two of them because it's stereo, and so they are the original chips. And then he's got a modern, I think it's a CPLD to interface to the CPU and make it think there's a Mockingboard in there. And it also has, what's cool about the 2C Plus version is it has a little wire that you can extra wire that you can solder in that makes it work with the system volume control. So you can move the system volume up and down because the Mockingboard has its own external speakers, much like, like a Sound Blaster for PC or whatever. It doesn't pipe the audio back into the PC speaker. It just has a line out. So you got to plug in your own speakers to get the Sound Blaster sound. Mockingboard worked the same way. So this guy comes with its own tiny little speakers that you can stick inside the case. And so they make their own little stereo sound. And then it has this extra wire that makes those speakers and the system speaker work off the system volume simultaneously. So it's really clever and seamless. And because the speakers in the, with the Apple IIc installation, the speakers end up physically close together. And so it mixes the sound just by nature of the speakers being close together in the air. And so when something like Ultima 5 is playing, their sound effects and the music at the same time, it all just mixes perfectly. So it's even a better experience than, say, a Mockingboard in an Apple II, where the Mockingboard has its own speaker on it. And so you're hearing that sound coming from sort of over here and the sound effects from over there. And it sounds a little odd. You can tell that it's two sound sources. But in this case, they actually mix seamlessly. And then, you could hook up. It doesn't have a line out on it, but you could create one pretty easily if you wanted to, because the board has a little connector on it where the speakers connect. So you could create your own line out if you were so inclined. It was really easy to install, and it just worked. I played Ultima 5 on it. I ran, Dieter has an Apple II, a Mockingboard tracker that plays ZX Spectrum music tracker files. Because it has the same sound chip, or one close enough or whatever. It has 3 tracks of synthesis. So there's a music tracker format for that. And he wrote a Mockingboard player for that. And it runs that perfectly. And so I had some good fun playing those songs. And the video and everything of all this will be in my blog post. It's an awesome thing. It sits inside the 2C. You never know it's there, but fire up a Mockingboard game and it sounds amazing. So really cool. And I'm probably mostly going to use it. So Dieter also has a Mockingboard library that he wrote for people who want to use Mockingboard stuff in their own Apple II code. And so I'll probably be playing with that to add some Mockingboard sound to my own stuff. So really cool. Strong recommend as soon as it's available again. I don't know I would think the limiting factor has to be those Yamaha sound chips, because they're vintage dip chips. Nobody's making those anymore. So he's sourcing those from somewhere. And I have to assume that's the limiting factor. So much like the Commodore community ran out of SID chips a long time ago, because those are unobtainable, these have to have some kind of limit on them. These chips were not as popular or not as hard to get as the SID. So they're still out there, but at some point that supply will dry up. I imagine someone could clone, those Yamaha sound chips with an FPGA or something. But in the meantime, that's got to be a limit.
Yeah. And I think, and Jeremy asks in the chat whether it has the speech chip also, and I think it does not, right?
It does not. No, that would be nice. But yeah, the speech was two additional large dip sockets, I think, on the original Mocking board. And that would not fit. I'm sure that he had to leave it out for space reasons because it's extremely tight in there. Like this board just barely fits. And I actually had to trim the pins on the underside of the key switches because the keyboard sits on top. So it's sitting between the motherboard and the keyboard, and it's really tight. So in order to have the keyboard sit flat on top of it, I had to trim the pins, just trim them just down to the solder blobs, because the factory leaves the pins quite long. They don't trim them at all. So I just had to trim them up to the solder, and then it would clear. But yeah, it's really tight in there, and there's no, additional X or Y space where he could go. So I think to get the speech on there, you would have to probably replace all the vintage chips with an FPGA or something.
Yeah, and that aspect of it makes me less enthusiastic about getting one for myself because I'm not sure how up for trimming pins I am.
Oh, yeah. So I think that I had a look at it after I had done that, and I think that it might be because the Yamaha sound chips, he puts them on the board, and the ones on my board were not super well seated. They were sticking up ever so slightly from the sockets. So I suspect if the chips were seated fully, that wouldn't have been an issue. Like it was very close. It was almost right there. But it wasn't scary or painless to trim the pins. Like we're talking about like a 1/16 of an inch off the bottoms of the pins. Like it was nothing.
Okay.
Because it was just that like the pins were scratching the tops of the chips. And I was concerned that if I put the screws back in, the keyboard would be ever so slightly stressed, because it wasn't floating in space the way the 2C keyboard is supposed to be. And if you have, so some 2C keyboards have a brace underneath them to stiffen them, and you do have to remove that. So the 2C Plus, as far as I know, keyboards do not have that, so it wasn't an issue. But I think for the 2C, you have to remove a brace that's in there to make space. So, your mileage may vary, but it's easy to reverse though if you decide you don't like it. So that's another thing too. You can stick it in there, and if you don't like it, take it out.
The sound is too good. Yeah.
It really does sound amazing.
I don't deserve this sound.
Yeah, no, it does sound amazing. The speakers are great. Like there's tiny little speakers, but micro speaker technology has come a long way. And so the little tiny speakers that it comes with that fit inside the Apple IIc sound way better than the factory one that is in there. So that's come a long way as well. The only real letdown for me, I mean, the speech would have been nice. Yeah, the main letdown for me was that very little software support at the Mocking board. Atari Age, actually, maybe we can find that link. Atari Age has a list of all the Apple II games that support it. It's not complete, like some of the modern stuff's not in there, like Dieter's Tracker Player, but contemporary games, it's basically like it's Lady Tut and Ultima 5 and a couple of others that people know, and that was it. So it was not a well-supported board, unfortunately. But all the modern stuff is supporting it. So Nox Archaeist supports it, and 4AM's working on a game that supports it. So I think people have accepted it now much more than they did back then.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I think we have made it through the items of interest and the items of news. And so now a word from our sponsor.
Mocking board.
I didn't have a good idea for a gift idea, so I just took the only thing that was left in our Discord, which is this shirt. Okay, let's see.
Oh gosh.
Let me find share, stop screen. What do I want to do? Stop screen, share screen. Okay. I think it's very nice. Okay, let's see.
Even the logo looks fake.
Yeah, I know.
It's all fake.
It looks like
And we're back.
satire of an 80s product logo.
Yeah. So this would have been better last week, but nevertheless, or last time. But this is the host's retro computing gift idea this time is the Sam Coupe Classic T-shirt. I'm not sure. I think the T-shirt is classic. I'm not sure the Sam Coupe T-shirt is a classic Sam Coupe T-shirt. But anyway, it's a design available on Redbubble, designed and sold by Retro Trader, and it is the Sam Coupe logo on a shirt. So there you go.
Worn at Samfest every year, I'm sure. Whatever.
It's only $19.39. So, and it's Redbubble, so you can choose whatever size you want. Anyway, there you go. So if you want to promote the Sam Coupe and have people ask you, Sam Coupe, what is that? Is that like Sam Goody?
I was just going to say, sticking with Carrington's carry around weird stuff to make friends lifestyle, this would go great with your Beagle Brothers tote bag and whatever else. Because if someone recognizes,
ask me how that's working for me.
Yeah.
Well, but if someone recognizes this, I mean, marry them because your soulmates clearly.
That's right. Excellent. All right. So when you're done finding your next soulmate by buying a shirt, then you can turn your attention to eBay. Carrington has the first of these things, but he is probably in an attempt to share his screen. He has disconnected from the stream.
Yes, the share button is right next to the leave studio button, so we have temporarily lost Carrington. Computers are hard, I know.
That's fantastic. It's always very funny when that happens.
I mean, it's pretty poor. Yeah, it's pretty poor UX, to be honest, that the share button is right next to the button that completely
Leave
removes
studio.
you.
I'm like, oh goodness.
Yeah, but in fact, actually, when I published this on the site where we publish these things, I'm always worried that right near the the upload button is the delete podcast button. Like,
and it's
one of these
so
days,
tempting.
the whole thing's going, but
That'll show us.
yeah. All right, so Carrington, you have the first of these.
I do indeed. So I've picked a classic Mac from 1980. You might not be aware that there was a computer from 1980 called the Mac, and I am very surprised that they didn't just hang on a few years just to get that sweet Apple lawsuit money. So this thing is by a company called Entex. It was a 1980 computer, in quotes. Crazy though, I never heard this thing before. I know of Entex, although there's a neat article called Entex, the computer or the game company you've never heard of. They produced a lot of handheld games, a lot of LED and LCD handheld games. And this thing was a little mini desktop computer called a Mac. You get little cards that you would slip in the front and had a 4x4 grid of little LEDs and also a little digital display. So it was a dual screen Mac from 1980, but
Wow.
It's not very useful. It comes with a collection of games, really on like Filofax cards. They put in, all it does is cover up some of the holes that lets the light shine through in the 4x4 grid and then give you instructions on how to play. So it is what it is, but I thought it was kind of funny that it's a Mac from 1980. If they had just held on a couple of years, they could have sued Apple and probably be worth more than they were. So that's my first choice. I think it's kind of funny. So if you're a collector,
Reminds me a little bit of like the Merlin or whatever.
very much so. It's got color of a Merlin. It's kind of the same use as a Merlin. In fact, it has a Simon Says game. So it's that kind of thing. It's $800. Buy it now because relatively rare item and not really a computer, but it kind of made me laugh that it's a technically a Mac from 1980. So that was my first choice. I got three quick choices this time. Number two is something that Quinn might know about.
Yeah.
What?
Hold on. I got one joke to make about that because I feel like this thing is the forbidden love child of the Intellivision and the Mattel electronic football game because it's like 4 LEDs that you then slide overlays onto to make them do other things. So that's what I see when I see this thing.
And the
That was
Vectrex too, where you have a little screen color.
That's
grid
right.
that
It did
you
have
put over it.
overlays. Yeah.
But this very much like the I think you're right though, Quinn. Like that whole kind of like put an overlay and with the buttons and the color reminds me of the Mattel stuff.
Yeah, it does.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
like
the Mattel stuff, they got a ton of mileage out of like 7 LEDs. Like if you actually look at the hardware of like the electronic football and those games that everyone loved so much, it's like 8 LEDs and they just light them up in different orders. And it's like somehow OMG, it's a football game. This is doing very much the same thing.
This
D
has
is a dog.
16 LEDs, so it's even better. It's not an 18-bit space computer, but it still works. So take that, NASA.
I wonder if MAME emulates this yet.
Jeremy, make it happen.
Yeah, I think they've started, haven't they, on those like Mattel handheld electronic games? Like they're actually emulating. I think they have started emulating those at the actual hardware level. Like they're simulating the chips the way MAME does.
Cool.
Yeah, so they might get to this someday.
Nice. My second choice is actually just to point out a series of auctions from somebody who used to work at Bungie at around the time that you worked there, Quinn, I think. It says it works around the time of Oni and stuff, and is selling off a bunch of things from a bunch of Bungie merchandise for it's all to promote Big Brothers and Big Sisters in the US. He's a big brother or a big sister, or he or she, I don't know who it is, but somebody in Texas. And so right now there's Marathon Infinity boxes, 2 of those, and a neat thing from Bungie Halo 15 Years of Memories, I guess from a holiday party. But on each of these has a photo near the end showing a big collection of Bungie stuff, all of which is going to be auctioned off over the next week or so, or next couple of weeks, for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And I just thought it was kind of neat that Quinn's going to be on the show, and here's maybe a Bungie person you might have worked with, because I think they worked at the same time. So.
Yeah, wow, that is cool. Yeah, there's Pathways in there, Myth, Minotaur. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, depending on how long they work there. Oh yeah, there's Oni at the top. So yeah, the top left, like center top on the left, the large Oni box. That was what I worked on when I was there. That game. Cool. So we did the Mac version of that and the PC version. The PlayStation 2 version to the next of it, to the right of it, that was done by an outsourcer. So that wasn't actually a Bungie game. But yeah, wow. How about that?
Yeah. Says,
I really like the Marathon boxes. I think they're very cool.
They are neat.
Oh, me too. Yeah, the shape of them. Yeah, and they're super collectible. So they're awesome. So anyway, it's all supposed to be for Big Brothers. It says in here somewhere, but Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So it's for charity. And just neat Bungie stuff. Some of it's going for quite a bit of money and has lots of bids, but we'll see. And a lot of Bungie. So if you're a fan of Bungie things, this might be a way to get stuff and feel good about supporting a charity. So that was my second choice. Third one is more feel good for other reasons. And it's they talked about this seller in Retro Mac Cast has a bunch of interesting buttons up, but I love this button, RAP PC Junior. It is so snotty. And so using this terrible early Mac fonts, I just love it. So it's clearly an Apple person, a Mac person feeling very, very good about themselves and made this button. And I love this button. So it's RIP PC Junior 1984 to 1985.
Yeah, I mean that's the part it's just like, here, put the knife in and twist it a bit.
Yeah. And it's funny that the button is done in worse graphics than the PC Junior actually had. The PC Junior had Tandy graphics, which were pretty good. Certainly better than that.
Yeah.
That's clearly 8-bit Mac art there.
Taken from a screenshot. Yeah, it's 8-bit Mac art. And for somebody who didn't really have a great sense of fonts, it's delightful. Everything about it is so sure of itself. It's like, oh goodness. I love it. So I love it. I love this button very, very much. So RIP PC Junior, take that.
Very nice.
But it's $50. I don't know if I'd spend $50 on the button, but it's a pretty cool button.
Yeah,
it's quite a lot of layers of jokes there. I feel like to get that.
Again, but if it helps me make friends.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a bit like that Radio Shack strike button that we somehow both own.
Right.
It takes you 20 minutes. Yeah, it takes you 20 minutes to explain why it's interesting, and then the person has long left. But if they haven't, marry them.
Exactly. If they haven't, then I had a new friend. Yes, exactly. So those are my choices. 3 quick ones.
Excellent. Okay.
What do you got, Paul?
I have a few. So today, this didn't make it up into the main items of interest, but it's like today or very recently, was the 40th anniversary of the TI-99 4A. And so I have one of the auctions I have is a instance of the TI-99 4A. It's not super expensive. It's $30 at the first bid, and it's in it. I've always kind of liked these boxes, and the box comes with it. So, but it looks it's kind of a nice
You
looking
mean
box.
the box, not the computer?
Right,
box,
yeah, but
like
the box
computer
it comes
stuff. You
in,
mean the
it's sort of
actual
nicely
box.
styled. I also think the CC40 boxes look nice too. But anyway, so whatever. It's and the computer itself also looks nice. It's slow, and, but it comes with the stuff, the user reference guide and some of the paper stuff, and it's actually got the power supply with the. I don't see the sticker on the box. Usually there's the sticker on these boxes often that indicates that the power supply has been, like improved in some way. It's been made safer, no longer sets your house on fire or whatever it is that the original ones did. But I don't see the sticker on the box, but I think there's a sticker on the power supply itself that says this in very small font. So if you wanted something that's somewhat complete, this is not a particularly expensive one. It's not a particularly valuable computer, but usually they show up by themselves with a bunch, jumble of cables and a half-working joystick or something. And this one seems like it's kind of, at least nice looking.
No joystick, which is even better.
No, right, exactly. Not even half-working.
Well, and
yeah, as I said that, I was just noticing that.
But much like the PC Junior, the TI-99 has vastly underappreciated graphics. Like it actually has an excellent graphics chip in it that does sprites and multiple layers and parallax scrolling, and it's actually very capable machine. It just no one ever got to really push it to its limits because it never caught on in the market. But yeah, actually really nice looking machine. Nox Archaist on Twitter has been retweeting in progress images from an Ultima style RPG that someone is writing for the TI-99, and so it's using a lot of more kind of aggressive methods to get good results out of it. And it's a beautiful looking game. Like it looks like you wish Ultima on the Apple II did, because you recognize it as that style, but it's much, much prettier. A lot of colors and a lot of really nice detail.
Yeah. Is one of the things, I'm sure this will be a thing next time, but Ben Edwards wrote an article about the TI-99 turning 40 that sort of covers probably stuff like the niceness of its graphics and so forth.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and
the graphics,
Blake, I think, was a TI-99 4A user.
Yeah, the graphics chip from that computer went on to have a much bigger life than the computer did. So, I mean, it was in arcade machines and it was in the ColecoVision. And so the graphics chip was much more successful than the computer was in the marketplace. TI sold that chip to a lot of other users. So, yeah, I've said this a million times, but it's also the same chip that's in the F-18A, which is a homebrew video card device that you can buy for use in your own projects, or also as a replacement for the TI-99. It's an upgrade that's pin compatible that you can swap into your TI-99 to give it 80 columns and a bunch of other cool features.
Mm-hmm. And it was in an 8-bit era, it was a 16-bit machine. It was slightly fancier, but yet somehow slow.
Yeah, I believe the bus was still 8-bit. So it was 16-bit in the sense that like the Genesis was, or, the 2GS is, where it's a 16-bit CPU in the sense that the registers are wide, but the memory is still 8-bit and all of the infrastructure is still slow. So it's kind of a transitional machine.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's certainly no 18-bit space computer.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see. What else to talk about? Oh, I'll mention this next one. Just it's sort of interesting. I think we came across this before. It's a Tapwino, but it's a built one. So this is an Arduino, basically. Maybe it's a Tapewino. I don't know. But it's basically for playing tape files into Commodores. So it connects to the user port, or not. Maybe it's not the user port. It connects to the cassette port, the dataset port, and it has an Arduino based thing that lets you put a SD card in it and play the tape files into basically every model of Commodore except the one I have. So the SX64 does not have this port, but and does not have the tape stuff in its ROM, but the Commodore 64, VIC-20, and PET can do it.
Okay, so it's basically emulating that data
the cassette
thingy. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
The design of this is very nice. I feel like this is they're underselling it by the fact that they don't show it installed on the Commodore. But the way this is arranged, it would stick up vertically behind the Commodore, and that little screen would be just above the keyboard at the back, and then the little buttons are on top. And I'm guessing that bevel that's halfway up is probably right at the top curve of the breadbox of the Commodore. So I bet this looks really cool installed on the machine, and they should have shown that in one of their photos.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and it's got a little appears to be a little LCD display, or LED or whatever, a bright display of some kind. It is 40 Canadian dollars, shipping from where? British Columbia. So,
ooh, go Canada.
Yeah. I do love the archaic looking connector on the bottom of it, because of course the Commodore 64 saved a lot of pennies by most of their quote unquote ports are just card edges on the back of the motherboard. And so that's basically a card edge female connector there.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. There is I think this is sort of interesting, and actually in a sense, I think it's maybe listed in a way that people won't notice it. It's not going for super cheap, but it is a quad link by quad RAM. And I think it's interesting for people who are interested in this. I think it's not particularly practical, but it's basically an Apple II on a card that you can put into a PC. So it's quad link by quad RAM. And this is, I think it's an Apple IIe, essentially, that you put into an IBM PC. So if you wanted to have both a PC and an Apple II in the same footprint, then this is the way you do it. And they're pretty uncommon.
I've never heard of this. Does it use the same floppy drive, or does it have its own floppy connector? How does that work?
Yeah, it connects to the floppy drive. It has I think it actually has just a separate monitor. So you connect to the composite out to get the output. So like your PC will show the PC screen, and then it will simultaneously be running an Apple II. And there's a joystick connector, and there's a composite out, and it uses the drives in the PC. I don't think there's a way to connect it directly to the monitor. I have one of these that I put into one of the PC portables, 5155, I guess they are. But I couldn't find a way to make it display the Apple II on the internal monitor. So I had to have an external monitor connected to it.
I would be interested to know what the story is with the floppy drives, because again, like we were saying earlier, I thought the PC drives were physically incapable of reading and writing Apple II disks because of the flux encoding difference. So like that's why I like the PC transporter, for example, on the Apple II, you had to plug in an external monitor and an external floppy drive. In fact, it came with its own PC floppy drive. But if this does not require that, I'm super interested in how they did that.
Yeah, I keep assuming that you must have to use a different drive as well. Like I'm looking for a drive connector on this card.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that I just put the floppy in the built-in drive.
That's interesting. I do like that they have a little. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, did you use this in your stolen Bell and Howell? Is that what you used it? Right. Is that why you can call for tech support?
Yeah, I think you were going to mention the externalized game port.
Yeah, I like that they have a ZIF breakout board for the game port, as though that was so critical. And that's pretty cute. I guess if certain dongles and stuff needed that, but otherwise seems a little extravagant.
Yeah, although I think, like that's just a standard Apple II thing. Like I've seen that on a number of the 2+ or whatever that will externalize the game port for.
Okay. So that may not have come with this thing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
It does not have a way to install cards. Jeremy Rand in the chat suggests that if it had a way to install cards, you could have installed a PC transporter in it. It emulated a PC on your Apple, emulated in a PC.
That would be delightful. I would very much like to see that. I bet there's a way to hack a slot onto this, because the signals are all there on the board. So you just have to figure out where they are and break them out into a slot, and then put a PC transporter. Very cool. That'll be a retirement project for me, maybe, because that's too good not to try.
Right. Anyway, it's starting bid at $200. It's got it's newly listed, so it's got 5 days left from or 6 basically from when we're recording. That's not a crazy price. It's coming out of Florida. So, okay, let's see what else. Oh, here's a Okay, maybe I'll mention one more thing, which is the somebody is selling an IXO telecomputing system. This is an IXO TC102, and I think this had come up before. It's basically just a little terminal. Sort of at the 1982, 83 or something like that was when this is from. So it's basically just a little terminal with a single line display that you can use, and it's got a telephone connector in the back. I don't know if I've got a picture of the back, but so you basically just take it on business trips or whatever to your hotel room, and you plug it into you plug it in. You can connect to TimeNet, and various other things. But it's just supposed to be
characters at a time.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a little rough, but
the keyboard is beautiful. But can we talk about how there's a don't know button?
Yeah, I know. I think that's pretty cool. It's got a no button, a yes button, and a don't know button.
I want to know what the don't know button does.
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
I have a couple of these. So there's actually a nice little set of peripherals that you can get. So there's something that will allow you to connect to a full TV screen, and there's like a little modem. I think I forget exactly whether there's some small set of peripherals that you could get in like a little suitcase with this, and I have some manuals. So somewhere it will say what the don't know button does. So I'll try to find out.
That would be challenging to support. What's your data rate? Don't know. Enter the date. Don't know. What time is it? Don't know.
Yeah,
you got to figure all that stuff out because the user doesn't know.
It actually has. It's interesting. It has the. I think it's made by the people who invented this are the same people who invented Merlin, we were talking about earlier. That game that was, I think it was Milton Bradley, or I forget who actually made the game eventually, but I think the designers of this are the same as the designers of Merlin. It was actually a cover story on Byte magazine one month. One issue has the IXO telecomputing terminal on the cover, and a couple articles about it. But so this person was actually somebody who used it. I'd actually used this when I got sent on the road by my company. So it was someone who actually used it for something, not just found it in the back room of a store. Condition: it is old.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
But yes, that is also my condition.
That's right.
It's old. Also found in the back room.
Anyway, I think I'll leave those there. I don't think I had anything else too interesting to talk about. But I didn't see anything in the notes. But Quinn, did you have any that you wanted to bring up?
I do not, because I always forget when I'm going to be on the show that I'm supposed to pick eBay stuff. So once again, I have no items.
Okay, that's fine. Then I will edit that out. But I guess since we've gotten now through to the end of the eBay items, we can move on to closing discussions. Carrington, did you have any closing thoughts or notes?
I got vaxxed up today. Got my second shot.
Nice. Congratulations.
How are you feeling?
Great.
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's supposed to hit me tomorrow if it hits me.
Yeah.
But it was
I
early this morning. So.
I started feeling it 4 hours or so after the shot, and then the next day I was a wreck. I had to take the day off work.
Feeling nothing. Little soreness in the arm, but that's it. It's I got the Pfizer one both times. So.
Oh yeah, me too. Hey, Team Pfizer.
Yeah, as did I. So.
Ooh, that's why the other people aren't on the show. They're not allowed to be.
But actually, for me, I lucked out. I really just felt nothing more than like the arm ache of a flu shot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my dad was the same way. Some people just nothing, and other people they're just wasted for 2 days. It's crazy how wide the range.
It's a lifestyle choice, Quinn.
Well, let's see. Am I next? So I took. I went to I think I mentioned this. Did I mention this? I don't know if I can't remember what I said, on the podcast and what I said in the Discord, and but anyway, I went to get some things recapped. So I got a Color Classic board recapped and a 2E card recapped. And it actually turns out that there's somebody in the Boston area who's starting sort of like a vintage repair store and also this little computer museum
That's
sort of
cool.
attached. And he said that he's got he's basically able to do recapping, and I am not sure that I am. So I thought this perhaps is a good opportunity. So I brought those things to him and have got them back. My Color Classic starts. My 2E card doesn't yet work, but I think it didn't work before I brought it. So I don't, it also doesn't work now.
Not any worse.
That's right. So I'm still working on that, but it's kind of cool to see the Color Classic start up again. And so I've seen this place, and actually I think I'm going to probably I think we'll be talking with him on a future episode of the podcast about his collecting and his collection and stuff. But he's got some really cool stuff. I mean, he's been sort of focusing on bringing together, essentially the big machines of the home computing era. And so there's in his little sort of museum area, he's got he has like an Altair and an IMSI and, a PET and original Apple II and all these things, really pretty impressive.
Even as a kid, Quinn knew that the PET was nothing compared to the Apple
That's
II.
true. But nevertheless.
Yeah.
Well-established fact.
Yeah, I would walk right past it on his display. I'd be like, Altair cool, Apple II cool. Nothing between them as far as I can. Yeah, garbage.
But yeah, so I'm really quite looking forward to visiting it when it's actually fully set up and opening. He's going to open it in the sort of latter half of July, I think. So, but anyway, so hopefully we'll actually hear from him about his collection soon. But and if you're in the Boston area, go check it out. It's called the Byte Shop, and it is in Jamaica Plain. So.
I love the idea of a retro repair shop because there's lots of people that have stuff that needs recapping, but they don't feel comfortable doing it themselves. Like that's awesome to be able to just send that off.
Yeah, or I mean, even better than sending it off, drive it off. I mean, like so if you're like me and it's local, then that is much better. There's a place we mentioned before, MacCaps, that you can send things to and they will be fixed up and sent back to you. But there's always a risk in mailing things away. So
I hope he gets into CRT repair because that's going to be the next big frontier. I think the CRTs are all going to start dying soon. And I think, as we've talked about before, the last factory that was making them shut down or whatever. So the arcade community has gotten very, very good at repairing those things. So they can be kept going for another 20 years or so. But you got to have some expertise.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so that's I'm sort of going through finding more things that need recapping, and the list is very long, but anyway, I'm making some progress. So Quinn, any closing thoughts?
Not especially. I'm looking forward to playing more with my Mockingboard. I'm going to check out Dieter's library for writing code for it. That'll be fun. And I'm going to play some more with the A2IO. I think I'll try and track down a Bluetooth game controller because that could be really cool. It'd be a great way to play games if it works. So and I'll be finishing up my blog post actually this afternoon. I'll finish it up. I just got to do one more edit on it and I'll post it. So by the time the show goes live, this blog post will be up for sure. And the other retro thing, we don't talk about this stuff here, but it is retro, which is pinball. I've got a pinball repair project underway as well. So, we talk about leaking batteries in retro computers. Well, it's a big problem in pinball machines as well. The 90s pinball machines all had banks of AA batteries in them, usually in surprisingly terrible places. So like the Johnny Mnemonic board that I have, it's the Williams 89 board set. And that board set, for some unbelievably crazy reason, has the battery pack mounted on the motherboard about 12 inches straight up above the CPU and all of the major connectors. So the batteries just leak all over and it just runs down the board. And so the first thing you do when you get a Williams 90s era pinball machine is take the batteries off, install a remote battery box and run wires to it. And I did that when I got it, but the previous owner had not. And so I've got a connector on the bottom of the motherboard that's always been touchy. And unfortunately, the start button is on that connector. So literally, I cannot start the game because that pin on that connector is the one that's corroded. And I repinned the connector, and I replaced the header on it and it's still flaky. So I got to take the motherboard out again and take it all apart again and try to figure out why that pin is flaky. So yeah, I don't know why, but yeah, and the batteries that I put in it, maybe one of our viewers knows this. So I put new batteries in. I put the batteries or replace the batteries every year in this thing, just in case they leak. And the batteries are now living in a place where if they leak, it doesn't matter. But I put new batteries in that thing about 6 months ago, and they leaked. I just checked in there the other day, and the seals on the batteries are all bad, and they've dribbled all over the cabinet. So I don't know what's going on. Is there something that makes batteries leak more than others? It might be that the board is drawing current out of them all the time, more so than computers do. I don't know. But the expiry date on these batteries is 2023. So they are new batteries, and they leaked like that. So I don't know what it is about pinball machines that makes batteries leak so badly. But maybe somebody who knows these things better than me can tell me.
Yeah.
But that's it for me. That's my retro future for the next little while.
Yeah, there was one thing I forgot to mention that came up, and I think I would forget to mention it if I didn't mention it now, which is that so I was talking with Blake about, I think it was flight simulator. So maybe at some point we're going to talk about flight simulators. And Blake has there's a controller for a flight simulator that we were talking about. It has 2 joysticks on it, and there is one. I have one for the Apple II that was sort of specifically for a remote control flight simulator, and it has 2 little joysticks on it. And Blake was saying, well, that's kind of weird. I didn't actually realize that the Apple II, had 4 paddle inputs. And I thought, and I, looked at the instruction sheet for this little dual joystick thing, and then I was, on it has a little bit of a AppleSoft program that tells you how you can interface with it, and it just says, it just reads paddle 0 to 2, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. I guess reads paddle 0 to 3, and so I went and I looked up. I thought, well, that's kind of weird. I also didn't know that the Apple II had 4 paddle inputs, and so I, went and looked up in the AppleSoft manual the paddle command, and it said, you can use paddle 0 to 2 and or 0 to 3 and it'll read these. And then it mentioned that if you be careful, don't use paddle numbers higher than that, because you can get erratic behavior, and sometimes it'll cause the speaker to click, and if you do paddle 236, then it's going to turn the graphics on. And I thought, well, that's weird. but it just seemed like it's kind of a funny thing, because it's well, clearly what happened is they just didn't check. They don't check to make sure it's 0 to 3. They just go fetch memory, and it turns out that if you fetch memory, whatever memory corresponds to paddle 236, it'll turn on the graphics. But what's weird about that is that it doesn't work in all the emulators. It works in MAME. It'll turn the graphics on in MAME, but it doesn't turn the graphics on in Virtual 2. And the reason for that turned out to be very interesting. And there's just a big, long discussion in Slack about this. But essentially, if you read paddle 236, it will go out and it will fetch the contents of the memory at C150. So that's the address C150 in the Apple II, which is it's somewhere in the slot 1 ROM. But the thing is that the way the 6502 works, if you particularly are trying to get at that address by crossing a page boundary with an index, with an X register index, then it takes 2 steps to compute that address. And so in order to compute C150, it first computes C050, and then it has to carry to get to the C1. And so it touches the C050 address, which turns on the graphics mode. So it's this weird 6502 quirk that not all the emulators emulate, that causes the graphics to pop on if you read paddle 236. And it was just this weird rabbit hole that I went down, and it's lovely. I like it a lot. Anyway.
Yeah, that's actually the other idiosyncrasy there. So that is actually a known bug in the 6502 that, when you cross a page boundary with an index read, it touches memory that it shouldn't. And it's actually a bug in the chip that they fixed in the 65C02. So later Apple IIs also won't have that issue, or won't have that thing.
That feature.
Yeah. It's a super weird quirk in the 6502 that almost never comes up, but there's warnings about it in a lot of Apple II programming guides, but it never really is a problem until it is.
I was hoping that maybe you might be able to use it if you wanted to save program space. If you wanted to turn on graphics, you could read paddle 236 instead of poke -16504 or whatever it is. But it turns out though, you do save 1 byte over the poke.
Yeah.
-16 whatever it is, except that you could just put that into you don't need to use the negative address. You could use the positive address, and then you would save that byte anyway. So
yeah, Dieter was talking about that on Twitter. He was saying, I can use this as a way to save a byte for his Twitter bot exploits that he's been doing. And he tried it, but the whatever emulator the Twitter bot is using does not emulate that bug, and so that trick doesn't work for those programs.
Very sad. But yeah, I think I thought that was it was pretty cool that I hadn't come across that before 2021. But the other thing is it's a 6502 bug, which means if any other machines that use the 6502 have read accessible soft switches like that will cause some state change in the machine, then you could do something like that on an Atari or a Commodore 64 or a PAD or something. Although I think it's quite possible that most of these require writing, and they require writing.
Yeah.
So this trick only works for reads.
Yeah, it may be unique to the Apple II that the soft switches are all read or write, that just touching the address is enough because of the way Woz did the address decoding that you can get away with that. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've sort of always known about that 6502 bug, but I've actually never seen a material manifestation of it until this Twitter conversation last week. Like, it was the first time I was like, oh, that's the bug everyone's always talking about. That's what it's doing. That's what happens. Yeah, it's neat.
Yeah, it is very strange. All right. Excellent. I think we made it. So thanks everybody for joining us in the chat, and thanks everybody for podcasting. That's now it for this show. You can find the show notes for this and all the RCR shows at rcrpodcast.com. You can discuss the show in the forums at vcfed.org/forum/forum.php. You can follow RCR on Twitter at I tried, but you can follow RCR on Twitter at RCR Podcast. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/RCR Podcast. You can send feedback to feedback@rcrpodcast.com. We are a member of the Throwback Network at throwbackreviews.com. And please write a review on iTunes if you want, because that's what we say to do. And until next time,
Retrocompute.
That actually wasn't
wonderful.
bad.
Yeah. Cool. All right. We made it not much over 2 hours.
It's a new record, I guess.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah. Bye, YouTube.